The sirens screamed through downtown like the city itself was dying. People ran in every direction, but one man moved differently. Forward, calm, precise. Daniel Hayes wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to exist in this version of reality. The truck had crashed, smoke billowing into the morning sky, and somewhere in that chaos a threat was unfolding that nobody else could see. His wife, Victoria, watched from across the plaza as her husband, the quiet, ordinary father who made pancakes and fixed bicycles, transformed into someone she had never met. And in that moment, everything she thought she knew shattered like glass. Before we dive into this story, if you're enjoying it, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's get into it. The morning had started like any other Tuesday in Victoria Hale's meticulously ordered life. She stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office on the 42nd floor, surveying the city below like a general surveying a battlefield. The coffee in her hand was precisely 160 degrees, hot enough to matter, cool enough to drink immediately. Her assistant had learned that detail 3 years ago. Everything in Victoria's world existed in perfect balance. Hale Tech Industries, the company she'd built from a software startup into a $9 billion empire, ran with the efficiency of a Swiss watch. Her calendar was color-coded. Her meetings started on time. Her decisions were made with data, not emotion. And her husband was the one variable she'd never quite figured out how to optimize. Daniel Hayes. Even his name sounded ordinary, plain, safe, which was exactly why she'd married him. Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Dropping Sophie at school. Need anything from the store? She smiled despite herself. 3 years of marriage, and he still texted like they were dating, still asked about groceries, still existed in a world that seemed completely separate from hers, a world of parent-teacher conferences and soccer practice, of bedtime stories and scraped knees. Her world was quarterly earnings and hostile takeovers. His was graham crackers and homework. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. Just coffee, she texted back. The good kind. Already got it, came his immediate response. See you tonight. Love you. Victoria set down her phone, that small warmth still lingering in her chest. Her second-in-command, Marcus Chen, knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege earned over a decade of loyalty. The Henderson merger is falling apart, he said without preamble. They want another meeting. They always want another meeting, Victoria replied, turning from the window. What they want is leverage. What's our position? Strong, but Henderson's threatening to walk. Then let them walk. We don't chase, we create better opportunities. Marcus nodded, making notes on his tablet. He'd learned years ago not to question Victoria's instincts. She was rarely wrong. But she had been wrong about one thing. She had been catastrophically, completely wrong about the man who made her coffee every morning. Across the city, in a different kind of morning entirely, Daniel Hayes knelt in front of his daughter, adjusting the straps on her backpack with the kind of patience that came from practice. Dad, I can do it myself, Sophie protested, but without much conviction. At 7 years old, she still liked when her father fussed over her, even if she pretended otherwise. I know you can, sweetheart, Daniel said, his voice gentle. Just making sure. Sophie's school was only 3 blocks away. But Daniel always walked her. Not because she needed him to, she was perfectly capable, but because these moments mattered. Because in another life, in another version of himself, he'd missed too many moments like this. The neighborhood was waking up around them. Mrs. Patterson watering her flowers, old Mr. Kim opening his convenience store. The city had a rhythm here, in this small pocket of normalcy, and Daniel had learned to move with it. Can we get ice cream after school? Sophie asked, her hand small in his. Maybe, if you eat all your lunch. That's not fair, you know I don't like the carrots. Then eat everything except the carrots. Sophie considered this diplomatic solution and nodded, satisfied. They reached the school gates where other parents milled about, exchanging pleasantries and coordinating playdates. Daniel knew most of them by name now, the Johnsons, the Patel family, Sandra Mitchell, who always brought homemade cookies to the class parties. Normal people, living normal lives. Daniel had worked hard to become one of them. Have a good day, Bug, he said, kissing the top of Sophie's head. Love you, Dad? She ran toward her friends without looking back, and Daniel watched until she disappeared into the building. Only then did he turn away, his shoulders relaxing slightly. He had 90 minutes before he needed to pick up dry cleaning, then he'd planned to fix the loose hinge on the bathroom cabinet, prep dinner, and maybe finally organize the garage. The kind of schedule that would have made his former self laugh in disbelief. Captain Daniel Hayes. That's who he used to be. 12 years of service, 8 years with special operations. Missions in 17 countries, most of which he still couldn't talk about. 3 commendations for valor, 1 for actions that technically never happened. And then Sophie. Beautiful, impossible Sophie, who'd arrived in his life when her mother, a woman Daniel had dated briefly, years before his military career took him overseas, died in a car accident. Suddenly, at 29, Daniel had been a father. Suddenly, the missions that had defined him meant leaving a 2-year-old with babysitters and hoping he'd make it home. It had taken him 3 more years to realize what he had to do. Walking away from the military hadn't been easy. Walking away from the only identity he'd ever known had felt like dying. But staying would have meant missing Sophie's childhood, missing everything that mattered. So he'd left, retired quietly, moved to a new city, built a different life. And when he'd met Victoria at a charity fundraiser 2 years later, him there as a volunteer, her there as the keynote speaker, he'd been honest about being a single father, honest about wanting a simple life. He just hadn't mentioned everything else. Because the past didn't matter. The man he used to be didn't matter. All that mattered was the man he'd chosen to become. Daniel stopped at Joe's coffee shop, the small place on the corner where the owner knew his order by heart. The good coffee, the kind Victoria liked. Dark roast, Ethiopian blend. The usual, Danny? Joe called from behind the counter. You know it. The shop was busy with the morning rush. Professionals grabbing coffee before work, students hunched over laptops, the comfortable chaos of people starting their days. Daniel waited patiently, scrolling through his phone. An email from Sophie's teacher about an upcoming field trip. A reminder about his dentist appointment, the mundane architecture of an ordinary life. He paid, thanked Joe, and stepped back onto the street. The plaza was 3 blocks away. He'd cut through it 1,000 times, knew every bench, every fountain, every shortcut. He had no reason to think today would be different. Victoria's morning devolved into a series of increasingly tense meetings. The Henderson merger was more complicated than she'd anticipated. Their CEO, Richard Henderson, was playing games, pushing for terms he knew were unreasonable, testing her patience. He's stalling, Marcus said during a brief break, waiting for us to blink. Then he'll be waiting a long time, Victoria replied, her voice ice-cold with determination. Prepare the counter-proposal. If he wants to play hardball, we'll show him what hardball actually looks like. By 11:30, she needed air. Victoria rarely left the office mid-morning, but something about today felt suffocating. The walls of her empire, usually comforting, felt constraining. She told Marcus she'd be back in 20 minutes and took the elevator down to street level. The plaza outside her building was one of those urban spaces designed to make corporate workers feel less trapped. Trees, benches, a fountain that somehow still worked. Victoria walked slowly, letting the morning air clear her head. Her phone rang. Daniel. Hey, she answered, a smile automatically forming. You caught me playing hooky. Dangerous behavior for a CEO, Daniel's warm voice came through. I'm actually in the neighborhood, meeting a contractor about the kitchen renovation. Want to grab lunch? Victoria checked her watch. I've got the Henderson people in 45 minutes. Coffee, then. I'm at the plaza. She looked around and spotted him across the square, phone to his ear, holding 2 coffee cups and smiling at her. Even from a distance, she felt that small flutter, the one that still surprised her 3 years in. I see you, she said, waving. I see you too, Mrs. Hayes. She started walking toward him, weaving through the mid-morning crowd. Office workers on early lunch breaks, tourists consulting maps, a street musician setting up near the fountain. Normal. Ordinary. Safe. And then the world exploded. The sound came first, metal screaming, tires shrieking, the physics of momentum going catastrophically wrong. Victoria's head snapped toward the noise just in time to see a delivery truck jump the curb, its trajectory all wrong, heading straight toward the crowded plaza. People screamed, bodies scattered. The truck clipped a bench, sent it flying, and crashed into the fountain with a sound like reality breaking. Water erupted. Glass shattered. The vehicle's momentum finally stopped, but the chaos was just beginning. Victoria stood frozen, her executive brain trying to process, to categorize, to make sense of the senseless. And then she saw him. Daniel. Moving. But not like Daniel moved. Not with the casual, unhurried grace of a man who fixed bicycles and made pancakes. This was different. This was something else entirely. He dropped both coffee cups. Hadn't even watched them fall. His entire body had shifted, posture changing, eyes scanning, every movement suddenly precise and purposeful. The driver's door of the truck burst open. A man stumbled out, disoriented, bleeding from his head. But that wasn't what caught Victoria's attention. It was what the man was carrying. A gun, not a rifle, not something obvious, just a handgun, held low, but Victoria saw it. And more importantly, Daniel saw it. The plaza erupted into full panic, people running in every direction, no coordination, just pure survival instinct. The man from the truck was shouting something incoherent, waving the gun, his movements jerky and unpredictable. Victoria's feet wouldn't move. Her brain was still trying to catch up, trying to process. But Daniel was already moving, not running, not fleeing, moving toward the threat. "Everyone back!" His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Not loud, not panicked, just absolute, commanding. People responded without thinking, the authority in his tone bypassing their conscious minds and hitting something deeper. Victoria watched, transfixed, as her husband, her gentle, quiet husband, transformed before her eyes. He positioned himself between the armed man and the densest part of the crowd with movements that were economical, practiced. His hands were visible, palms slightly raised, body language non-threatening but ready. "Sir," Daniel's voice was calm, steady. "I need you to lower the weapon." The man's eyes were wild, unfocused. Blood ran down his face from a gash on his forehead. "They're following me. They won't stop. They're everywhere." Paranoia, possibly drugs, definitely dangerous. "I understand," Daniel said, taking a small step closer. "But nobody here is following you. Look around. These are just people. They're scared. They don't want to hurt you." "You don't know!" The man swung the gun wildly. "You don't know what they're capable of." Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to scream at Daniel to get back, to run, to stop being insane. But the words wouldn't come. Because this wasn't insanity. This was something else. This was expertise. "You're right," Daniel said, his tone almost gentle. "I don't know your situation, but I do know you're hurt. I can see you're bleeding. Let's get you some help, okay? Medical attention. We can sort everything else out after." He was closer now. Close enough to be in immediate danger. Close enough that if the gun went off, there'd be no time to react. But his hands remained steady. His voice remained calm. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. The question seemed to catch the man off guard. "What?" "Your name." "I'm Daniel. What's yours?" A long pause. The gun wavered. "Marcus, my name is Marcus." "Okay, Marcus, I'm going to help you, but I need you to do something for me first. I need you to point that gun at the ground. Not away. Just down. Can you do that?" Victoria realized she'd stopped breathing. The plaza had gone eerily quiet. Even the people who'd scattered had stopped at a safe distance, watching. Marcus's hand shook. The gun dipped slightly. "That's good," Daniel encouraged. "That's really good, Marcus. Now." And then it happened, too fast for Victoria to fully process. The gun started to rise again. Marcus's paranoia surging, his finger moving toward the trigger. Daniel moved. Not in a way Victoria had ever seen a human being move. Not with hesitation or thought. Pure reaction, pure training, muscle memory encoded so deeply it bypassed consciousness entirely. His hand shot out, catching Marcus's wrist and redirecting the barrel away from the crowd in the same motion. His other hand came up, struck the side of Marcus's neck with precise force. Marcus's eyes rolled back. The gun clattered to the pavement. Daniel caught the man as he fell, lowering him gently to the ground. The entire sequence had taken maybe 2 seconds. Victoria's knees nearly gave out. Sirens were approaching now, the wail of emergency services converging on the scene. But Daniel wasn't finished. He knelt beside Marcus, checking his pulse, his breathing, his pupils. Medical assessment. Professional. Thorough. When the first police car screeched to a stop, Daniel didn't stand up with his hands raised like a civilian would. He stayed calm, stayed in control of the situation. Single individual, possibly under the influence, paranoid delusions, armed with one handgun now secured on the ground 3 feet to my left. Daniel reported the instant the officers approached. His voice clipped and efficient. Subject is unconscious but stable. Pulse is strong. Visible head trauma from the vehicle collision. He'll need medical evaluation. The officers stared at him. "Who the hell are you?" one of them asked. Daniel hesitated for just a fraction of a second. A concerned citizen. But Victoria knew. Oh God, she knew. That wasn't the hesitation of someone lying. That was the hesitation of someone choosing which truth to tell. More emergency vehicles arrived. Paramedics rushed to Marcus. Fire trucks blocked off the plaza. Someone was shouting about evacuating the surrounding buildings, the organized chaos of crisis response. And through it all, Daniel stood there, answering questions with calm precision, describing exactly what had happened, his observations detailed and accurate. Victoria watched from 20 feet away, her entire world tilting on its axis. Officers were treating him like a colleague. Paramedics deferred to his assessment. When a senior detective arrived, he shook Daniel's hand like they were equals. "You did good work here," the detective said. "Civilian casualty prevention. That's a clean takedown. You have training?" Another hesitation. "Some. A while ago." "Well, you haven't lost it. What's your name for the report?" "Daniel Hayes." The detective wrote it down, then looked up. "Hayes, why do I know that name?" "I don't think you do," Daniel said quietly. But Victoria saw it. The flash of recognition in the detective's eyes, the quick reassessment, the slight change in posture that meant something had clicked. "Right," the detective said slowly. "Of course, just good work, Mr. Hayes." He walked away, already pulling out his phone. Daniel turned, scanning the crowd, and his eyes found Victoria. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the chaos. And Victoria saw something she'd never seen before in her husband's eyes. Not fear, not regret, just a quiet, tired acceptance. The acceptance of a truth that couldn't be hidden anymore. They didn't speak on the drive home. Victoria had canceled her afternoon meetings with a terse email. Marcus had tried to call 3 times. She'd ignored every attempt. Daniel drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression unreadable. Sophie was at a friend's house for a play date, safe, unaware, existing in the innocent version of reality where her father was just her father. When they reached the house, Victoria went straight to the living room and sat down, her hands clasped in her lap, her mind racing with 1,000 questions and no idea which one to ask first. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching her. "Victoria, don't!" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "Don't say my name like that. Don't use that voice. Not the gentle voice. Not the patient voice. Not the voice of the man I thought I married. I am that man." "Are you?" She looked up at him, really looked. "Because the man I married doesn't move like that. Doesn't talk to police like a fellow officer. Doesn't disarm gunmen with his bare hands like it's a normal Tuesday." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Can I sit?" "It's your house, too." He sat across from her, maintaining distance, giving her space. Even now, even in this, he was being considerate. It made her want to scream. "How long were you going to wait?" Victoria asked. "How long until you told me?" "I don't know." "That's not an answer." "It's the only honest one I have." Daniel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. "I didn't lie to you, Victoria. Everything I told you about my life was true. Except the parts you left out. Except those, yes." Victoria stood, needing to move, her executive energy demanding an outlet. She paced to the window, looked out at their quiet street, at the normalcy they'd built. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "I'm Daniel Hayes. I'm Sophie's father. I'm your husband. I'm the man who loves you more than anything in this world." And before that, silence stretched between them like a canyon. Before that, Daniel finally said, his voice low, I was Captain Daniel Hayes, Special Operations, 12 years of service, most of it classified. Victoria closed her eyes. Special Operations. Yes. Meaning what exactly? What does that actually mean, Daniel? Because I run a $9 billion company, and when I say I'm a CEO, people know what that means. But Special Operations? That could mean anything. That could mean, it means I did things I can't talk about in countries I can't name for reasons that are still classified. His voice was steady but quiet. It means I was very good at a very specific set of skills. It means I saw and did things that would give you nightmares. Try me. No. The single word landed with finality. Victoria turned to face him. No? No, Daniel repeated. Not because I don't trust you, not because I don't think you're strong enough, but because those memories are mine to carry. You don't need that weight. Nobody does. But you do? Someone has to. Victoria felt something crack in her chest. Not anger anymore. Something else. Something that felt dangerously close to heartbreak. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. In 3 years, Daniel. 3 years of marriage. Why didn't you trust me with this? Daniel stood slowly, moving toward her with careful steps, like approaching something fragile. Because I wanted to be the man you thought I was. Because that man, the one who makes pancakes and fixes things, and exists in this quiet, simple life, that's who I wanted to be. That's who I chose to be. But that's not who you are. It's exactly who I am. He stopped a few feet away. The person I used to be, the soldier, the captain, that was a role I played. A necessary one. But this life with you and Sophie? This is the first time I've ever just been myself. Victoria studied his face, searching for deception, for cracks in the story. But all she saw was exhaustion. The bone-deep weariness of someone who'd been carrying a heavy weight for a very long time. What happened today, she said carefully, what you did, that wasn't someone out of practice. That was someone who still knows exactly what they're doing. You don't forget, Daniel admitted. The training doesn't fade. It's there, always, just under the surface. But I chose not to use it. I chose to leave it behind. Until today. Until I didn't have a choice. Victoria moved to the couch, sinking into it, her legs suddenly unable to hold her upright. The detective recognized you. Maybe. Don't play dumb. I saw his face. He knew your name. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. There might be some people who remember. The work I did, it wasn't invisible. There are records, commendations, awards I never collected. If someone looked hard enough, and what would they find? A decorated officer who walked away, who retired quietly, who wanted to disappear into normal life. Why? Victoria looked up at him, genuinely confused. If you were successful, if you were good at it, why leave? Daniel's expression softened, and for the first time since they'd gotten home, Victoria saw the man she recognized. Because I had a 2-year-old daughter who needed her father. Because I'd already missed her first steps while I was in a desert somewhere. I'd missed her first words. And I realized that if I stayed, I'd miss everything else too. So you chose her. I chose her. I chose life. I chose to be present instead of absent. And then years later, I chose you too. Victoria felt tears building behind her eyes and forced them back. You should have told me. I know. I deserve to know who I was marrying. You did. You do. I'm sorry. The apology was simple, unadorned. No excuses, no justifications. Victoria didn't know what to do with that. What happens now? She asked. Because you know this doesn't stay quiet. There were cameras at that plaza, phones, people recording. By tomorrow, everyone will be asking who the mystery hero was. And when they find out, she gestured helplessly, this life you built, this quiet existence, it's over. Daniel nodded slowly. I know. You know? The second I moved, I knew, but I couldn't. He stopped, his composure finally cracking. That man was going to shoot. Maybe not intentionally, maybe just panic, fear, confusion. But the gun was coming up, and there were 50 people in that plaza, and you couldn't let it happen, Victoria finished softly. No. I couldn't. They sat in silence, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. Outside, the neighborhood continued its peaceful rhythm. Inside, everything had changed. I need time, Victoria finally said. I need to process this, all of it. Of course. And I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets. She looked at him directly. I don't care what else is in your past. I don't care what you can't legally tell me. But no more hiding, no more omissions. If there's something I should know, something that affects our family, our life, you tell me. Daniel met her gaze steadily. I promise. Okay? Victoria stood, her executive mind already beginning to organize, to plan, to strategize. Okay, then we deal with this together, whatever comes next. Together, Daniel agreed. But neither of them could have predicted what would come next. Neither of them could have imagined how fast the world would close in. And then, by the next morning, Daniel Hayes was famous. The footage appeared first on social media, shaky phone videos from a dozen angles, all showing the same thing. A man in jeans and a t-shirt, moving with impossible calm, talking down an armed individual, executing a perfect disarm. Within 6 hours, it had gone viral. Within 12, news outlets were running it. Within 24, someone had identified him. Victoria woke to 17 missed calls and twice as many text messages. Marcus's message was the most succinct. Turn on the news. Now. She did. Identified as Daniel Hayes, a former special operations officer with an impressive service record spanning over a decade. Sources indicate Hayes retired from military service 5 years ago, but as yesterday's incident clearly demonstrates, he hasn't lost any of his considerable skills. The TV showed the plaza footage again. Then, horrifyingly, it showed photos. Daniel in uniform, younger, harder. Daniel receiving a commendation. Daniel with his unit, faces blurred except for his. How did they get these? Victoria whispered. Beside her, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Military records are technically public if you know where to look, and apparently someone knew where to look. The news segment continued. Questions about why a decorated veteran with Hayes' background chose to step away from service. Attempts to reach Hayes for comment have been unsuccessful, but neighbors describe him as quiet, unassuming, and devoted to his young daughter. Victoria muted the TV. They're outside, aren't they? Daniel nodded toward the window. 3 news vans, 4 reporters, and that's just the ones visible from here. Jesus. I'm sorry. His voice was hollow. I knew this was a possibility. I didn't think it would happen this fast. Victoria's phone rang again. Her mother. She declined the call. We need a strategy, she said, her CEO brain kicking into gear. We need to control the narrative before it controls us. Victoria, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Like it or not, this affects me too. Affects Hailtech. Affects Sophie. She stood, pacing. We need a statement. Something simple, controlled. We acknowledge the incident, express relief that nobody was seriously hurt, and firmly establish boundaries around our privacy. I'm not doing interviews. Agreed. But we need to give them something, or they'll just keep digging. Daniel looked up at her, something like gratitude in his eyes. You're not running. What? You're not running. You're not angry. You're strategizing. Victoria stopped pacing. I'm still processing. Don't mistake crisis management for acceptance. But right now we have a problem, and problems need solutions. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Board meeting in 1 hour. They want to discuss the situation. I'm sorry. Of course they did. Victoria closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The board had been looking for any excuse to question her leadership lately. The Henderson merger falling through. Quarterly earnings being good, but not spectacular. And now this. Her husband revealed to be some kind of super soldier, complete with viral video evidence. They'd call it a distraction, a liability, a reason to doubt her judgment. I have to go, she told Daniel. Emergency board meeting. Because of me. Because they're vultures looking for any sign of weakness. She grabbed her clothes, already mentally preparing her arguments. Will you be okay here? Daniel gestured toward the window. I've dealt with worse than reporters. Victoria paused at the bathroom door. Daniel, what you said last night about choosing this life, did you mean it? Every word. Then prove it. Don't hide. Don't run. We face this together, like we agreed. He nodded slowly. Together. The Hailtech boardroom felt like a courtroom. Victoria sat at the head of the table, her expression neutral, as the 12 board members filed in. She could read the room instantly. Marcus was supportive, positioned strategically to her right. Eleanor Vance, the CFO, was neutral, waiting to see which way the wind blew. But James Cartwright, the oldest member and Victoria's most consistent opponent, was practically salivating. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Victoria began, her voice steady. "I assume you've all seen the news coverage regarding yesterday's incident." "Incident?" Cartwright leaned forward. "Victoria, your husband is trending worldwide. Mysterious hero and secret soldier are the top hashtags. That's not an incident. That's a PR catastrophe." "Interesting," Victoria replied coolly. "I watched him prevent what could have been a mass shooting. I'd call that heroism, not catastrophe." "Don't be naive. The optics are that a decorated veteran acted to protect civilians. If you see that as negative, perhaps you should examine your own biases." Eleanor cleared her throat diplomatically. "Victoria, I think what James is trying to say is that we're concerned about how this affects Hailtech. Our stock dipped 3% this morning." "And it'll recover by Monday," Victoria countered. "The market is reactive. Give it 48 hours and this will be yesterday's news." "Will it, though?" Another board member, David Park, spoke up. "Because the questions being asked aren't just about the incident. They're about you, about your judgment, about what else you might not have known about your own husband." Victoria felt the temperature in the room drop. This was the real attack, not Daniel's past, her judgment. "My personal life," she said carefully, "has never affected my performance as CEO. Hailtech has grown 40% under my leadership. We've acquired 7 companies. We've expanded into 4 new markets. My marriage doesn't change any of that." "But trust does," Cartwright pressed. "The board needs to trust your judgment. And learning that you've been married for 3 years to a man whose background you apparently didn't fully investigate raises questions." Marcus spoke up before Victoria could respond. "With all due respect, James, that's absurd. Daniel Hayes is a private citizen. He's not on our payroll. He has no access to company secrets. His past is irrelevant to Victoria's position." "Is it? Because right now every major news outlet is discussing Hailtech's CEO in the same breath as words like classified missions and special operations. That's not irrelevant. That's a distraction we can't afford." Victoria stood slowly, placing her palms on the table. "Let me be very clear. My husband's service to this country is something to be proud of, not ashamed of. He protected people yesterday. He protected people for 12 years before that. And if any of you think I'm going to apologize for that, or step down because of it, you're mistaken." "Nobody said anything about stepping down," Eleanor said quickly, shooting Cartwright a warning look. "Didn't they?" Victoria looked directly at Cartwright. "Because that's where this is heading, isn't it, James? You've been waiting for an excuse. The Henderson merger wasn't it. Last quarter's earnings weren't it. But this is personal enough to make it stick." Cartwright's expression didn't change. "I'm concerned about the company, as we all should be." "Then be concerned about actual threats. Be concerned about the cybersecurity breach last month that we haven't fully resolved. Be concerned about the talent acquisition problems in our engineering division. Be concerned about real issues, not invented scandals." The room fell silent. Marcus spoke into the quiet. "I move that we table this discussion. Give it a week. Let the news cycle move on, then reconvene if there are actual measurable impacts to address." "Seconded," Eleanor said quickly. Cartwright looked like he wanted to argue, but the momentum had shifted. Reluctantly, he nodded. "Fine. 1 week. But Victoria, you need to manage this. Control the narrative. Make it go away." "I'll handle it," Victoria said, her voice like ice. The meeting adjourned, board members filing out in uncomfortable silence. Marcus lingered behind. "That was close," he said quietly. "Too close." Victoria sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. "He's going to keep pushing." "Let him push. You've got the numbers on your side. The company is doing well." "Numbers don't matter if the board loses confidence." She looked at her oldest friend and ally. "Marcus, be honest with me. Is this actually a problem? Is Daniel's past going to hurt the company? Marcus considered the question seriously. In the short term? Maybe. Some volatility, some uncomfortable questions. But long term? No. You're right, it'll blow over. People have short attention spans. By next month, there'll be a new scandal, a new viral video, a new thing for everyone to obsess over. And if there's not, then we adapt, like we always do. He smiled slightly. Besides, having a genuine hero married to our CEO isn't exactly bad PR. We just need to reframe the narrative. Victoria nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. On Daniel, alone in the house with reporters outside. On Sophie, who'd be hearing about her father from strangers. On the quiet life they'd built that was crumbling faster than she could protect it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Sophie's school called. Other parents are asking questions. She's confused. I'm going to pick her up early. Victoria's heart clenched. This was what she'd feared. The ripples spreading beyond them, touching Sophie. I'll come home, she texted back. You have work. Nothing more important than this. She gathered her things, ignoring Marcus's concerned look, and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection in the polished metal. Composed, professional, in control. But inside she was terrified. Not of Daniel's past, not of the media attention, not even of the board's machinations. She was terrified of what happened when you built a life on a foundation that turned out to be incomplete. When the person you loved most had depths you'd never suspected. When everything you thought you knew turned out to be just the surface. Daniel sat in the principal's office, Sophie beside him, small and quiet in a way that broke his heart. Mrs. Rodriguez, the principal, looked uncomfortable. Mr. Hayes, I want to assure you that we take privacy very seriously here. But I'm sure you understand the other children have seen the news. They're asking questions. And some of the parents... She trailed off diplomatically. Some of the parents are concerned, Daniel finished for her. They just want to understand the situation. Sophie tugged on Daniel's sleeve. Dad, why were you on TV? Daniel looked down at his daughter, at her confused brown eyes, and felt something twist in his chest. He'd tried so hard to keep this separate, to keep her childhood pure and uncomplicated. Because I helped some people yesterday, he said gently. And someone recorded it. But Tommy's mom said you were a soldier. Were you a soldier? A long time ago, yes. Why didn't you tell me? The question was so simple, so heartbreakingly innocent. Why didn't you tell me? Because it was a different part of my life, Bug. Before you. It didn't seem important. Sophie considered this with the seriousness only a 7-year-old could muster. Was it scary, being a soldier? Sometimes. Are you still scared? Daniel pulled her close. Only of disappointing you. Mrs. Rodriguez cleared her throat gently. Perhaps it would be best if Sophie stayed home for a few days, just until things settle down. We can arrange for her assignments to be sent home. Translation, until the other parents stop panicking. Daniel nodded. That's probably wise. Thank you. They walked out of the school together, Sophie's small hand in his. The parking lot was mercifully empty of reporters. They were all still camped outside the house. In the car, Sophie was unusually quiet. What are you thinking, Bug? Daniel asked. Are you still a soldier? No, I stopped being a soldier before you could remember. Because of me? Because I wanted to be your dad more than anything else in the world. Sophie nodded slowly, processing. Tommy's mom looked scared when she saw you. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. People are sometimes scared of things they don't understand. But you help people. You helped those people yesterday. That's good. Yes, it is. Then why are they scared? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that the world is complicated? That people are contradictory? That the same skills that make you a protector also make you dangerous? Sometimes people focus on the wrong parts of the story, Daniel said finally. They see the soldier part and forget the dad part. Sophie thought about this. I like the dad part better. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. They pulled into the driveway to find Victoria already home, her car parked at an angle that suggested she'd been in a hurry. She met them at the door, pulling Sophie into a tight hug. Hey, baby, how was school? Short, Sophie said. Dad picked me up early. Can I watch TV? Sure, honey. Sophie ran off toward the living room, already moving past the confusion toward the resilience of childhood. Daniel envied her that ability. Victoria looked at him. How bad was it? The other parents are worried. The principal suggested Sophie stay home for a few days. Of course she did. Victoria's jaw tightened. Because God forbid we disrupt anyone's comfortable ignorance. Victoria, no, I'm serious. You saved lives yesterday, Daniel. Lives. And now you're being treated like some kind of threat because people would rather be scared than grateful. Daniel guided her toward the kitchen, away from where Sophie could hear. This was always going to be the reaction. You know that. Knowing it and experiencing it are different things. She leaned against the counter, suddenly looking as exhausted as he felt. The board had an emergency meeting. About me. About us. About whether your situation makes me unfit to lead. She laughed bitterly. Because apparently, not running a background check on my husband is grounds for questioning my judgment. Maybe they have a point. Don't. Victoria's eyes flashed. Don't you dare side with them. I'm not. I'm just saying, you did marry me without knowing everything. That was a risk. A risk I'd take again. The words came out fierce, certain. You think I regret marrying you because you have a past? Because you're more complicated than I realized? Daniel, everyone is complicated. Everyone has secrets. The difference is your secrets involve protecting people, serving your country. That's not something to be ashamed of. Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. I'm sorry this is affecting your work. Work is work. It'll sort itself out. What I care about is Sophie, is us. We'll be okay. Will we? Victoria looked at him directly. Because I'm watching our quiet life disappear in real time, and I don't know how to stop it. Maybe we can't stop it. Maybe we just have to adapt. Before Victoria could respond, Sophie appeared in the doorway. Dad, there are more people outside. They have cameras. Daniel and Victoria exchanged glances. Through the window, they could see the media presence had grown. 6 vans now. Reporters setting up on the sidewalk. Neighbors peering out from behind curtains. It's going to get worse before it gets better, Daniel said quietly. Victoria squared her shoulders, her executive persona sliding back into place. Then we control what we can. We release a statement. We establish boundaries. We protect our family. Together, Daniel agreed. Together. But as they stood there, watching their private life become public spectacle, both of them wondered the same thing. How do you protect normalcy when the world has decided you're anything but normal? And somewhere across the city, in offices and newsrooms and social media command centers, people were asking a different question entirely. Who exactly is Daniel Hayes? And what else is he hiding? The answers, when they came, would change everything. The statement went live at 4 o'clock that afternoon, carefully crafted by Victoria's communications team and approved by Daniel after 3 revisions. It was professional, brief, and revealed absolutely nothing. Daniel Hayes is a private citizen and devoted father who acted to protect others during yesterday's incident. We are grateful no one was seriously injured. We ask that our family's privacy be respected during this time. It satisfied no one. Within an hour, the media had picked it apart, analyzing every word choice, every omission. The lack of detail became the story itself. What was Daniel Hayes hiding? Why wouldn't he discuss his military service? What were these classified missions? The conspiracy theories started almost immediately. Victoria watched it unfold from her home office, her jaw clenched tight enough to ache. Marcus sent updates every 20 minutes, social media trending topics, cable news segments, opinion pieces already being written for tomorrow's papers. They're treating you like you're covering something up, Marcus said over speakerphone. The silence is making it worse. We're not giving them anything else, Victoria replied firmly. Let them speculate. They'll get bored eventually. Will they, though? Because I'm seeing analysis pieces comparing Daniel to Jason Bourne. There's a Reddit thread with 40,000 comments trying to figure out which operations he was part of. Someone started a change.org petition demanding the military release his full service record. Victoria closed her eyes. That's insane. That's the internet. Look, I'm not saying you should do a tell-all interview, but maybe consider a follow-up statement, something with a little more substance. Give them enough to chew on that they stop making things up. I'll think about it. She hung up and found Daniel standing in the doorway, 2 cups of tea in his hands. He'd been making tea all afternoon, his version of stress management. How bad? He asked, handing her a cup. People are comparing you to fictional assassins and demanding your military records be declassified. Daniel actually smiled. Well, at least they're creative. This isn't funny. I know, but if I don't laugh, I might lose my mind. He sat across from her, cradling his own cup. Victoria, I need you to understand something. This attention, it's not going away, not in a few days, maybe not in a few months. Marcus thinks we should release another statement. Will that help or just feed the fire? Victoria didn't have an answer. They sat in silence, the afternoon light fading through the windows, the sounds of reporters outside a constant background hum. Somewhere upstairs, Sophie was video chatting with her friend Emma, their laughter a bright contrast to the tension filling the house. I got a call today, Daniel said quietly, from my former commanding officer. Victoria's head snapped up. What did he want? To check in, make sure I was okay, and to remind me that certain details of my service remain classified regardless of public pressure. Meaning you can't talk about it even if you wanted to. Exactly. Daniel set down his cup. But he also said something else. He said the attention might bring people out of the woodwork, people from that part of my life. Some friendly, some not. A chill ran down Victoria's spine. What does that mean? It means I made decisions during my service. Good decisions that saved lives, but decisions that also made enemies. Most of those people have no idea where I am or who I became. But now, he gestured toward the window, toward the cameras, the reporters. Now they might. Victoria stood, pacing to the window. Are you saying we're in danger? I'm saying we need to be careful, aware. The chances of anything actually happening are slim, but I'd rather be paranoid than sorry. Jesus, Daniel. Victoria pressed her palm against the glass, watching the circus outside. A week ago, my biggest worry was a failing merger. Now I'm worried about enemies from your classified past coming after us. I know how this sounds. Do you? Because it sounds insane. It sounds like something from a movie, not real life. And yet here we are. Victoria turned to face him. What aren't you telling me? Daniel met her gaze steadily. Nothing you need to know right now. That's not the same as nothing. No, it's not. The honesty of it, the refusal to lie even when a lie would be easier, somehow made it worse. Victoria felt the ground shifting beneath her again, the foundation of her understanding crumbling piece by piece. I need air, she said abruptly. I need to get out of this house. There are reporters everywhere. Then we'll go out the back, through the neighbor's yard. I don't care. She was already moving toward the stairs. Sophie, get your jacket. 10 minutes later, they were in Victoria's car, having navigated through the Johnsons' backyard and emerged 2 streets over. Sophie sat in the back, delighted by the adventure, while Victoria drove with no particular destination in mind. This is like a spy movie, Sophie announced happily. It's ridiculous is what it is, Victoria muttered, but she felt the tension in her shoulders beginning to ease. They ended up at Morrison Park, a sprawling green space on the edge of the city where Sophie could run and play, and nobody knew who they were. Victoria and Daniel sat on a bench while Sophie made friends with a group of kids on the playground. She bounces back fast, Victoria observed. Kids do. They live in the present. Daniel watched his daughter with soft eyes. It's us adults who make everything complicated. Speaking of complicated, I need to know more about what you meant earlier, about people from your past. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. There was an operation in Yemen 7 years ago. We extracted an asset who had information about a terrorist cell. The extraction went sideways. We lost 2 men, and the asset barely made it out alive. But the information he provided stopped an attack that would have killed hundreds. Victoria listened, her heart rate picking up. The cell's leader survived our strike. He spent the last 7 years rebuilding, and he's the kind of person who holds grudges. Daniel's voice was matter-of-fact, clinical. His name is Khalil Nazari. Last I heard, he was operating out of Eastern Europe. The odds of him seeing news coverage about a random incident in an American city are astronomical, but not impossible. And if he does see it, then he knows I'm alive. Knows where I am. Knows I have a family. Daniel finally looked at her. That's worst case scenario, extremely unlikely. But I wanted you to know it's a possibility. Victoria felt cold despite the warm afternoon. What would you do if he came after us? Whatever it takes to keep you and Sophie safe. The simple certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified her, because she heard what he wasn't saying, that Daniel was prepared to become the soldier again, to do the things he'd left behind. I don't want you to have to go back to that, she said quietly. Neither do I. But I will if I have to. Sophie's laughter drifted across the playground, pure and carefree. Victoria watched her daughter, 7 years old and innocent, completely unaware that her father's past might reach into their present with violent hands. We should hire security, Victoria said, her executive mind engaging. Private protection, for Sophie at least. That might draw more attention. I don't care. If there's even a chance, Victoria. Daniel took her hand. I understand you're scared. I am too. But we can't let fear control us. We take reasonable precautions, stay alert, and live our lives. That's all we can do. That's not enough. It has to be. They sat in tense silence until Sophie ran over, breathless and happy. Can we get ice cream? Victoria looked at her daughter's hopeful face and felt something settle in her chest. Fear could wait. Paranoia could wait. Right now, they were just a family in a park on a beautiful afternoon. Yeah, Bug, she said, surprising herself with a smile. We can get ice cream. The ice cream shop was blissfully normal. No reporters, no cameras, just families and couples and the sweet smell of waffle cones. Sophie ordered mint chocolate chip, Daniel got vanilla, and Victoria chose coffee despite never having liked it before. They sat outside at a small table, and for 20 minutes the world was simple again. Then Victoria's phone rang, James Cartwright. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Victoria, we have a problem. Cartwright's voice was tight with barely contained satisfaction. The press has found a connection between Daniel's military service and one of our government contracts. Victoria's stomach dropped. What connection? 3 years ago, Hailtech won a contract to provide cybersecurity infrastructure for military installations. The approval process went through the same division where Daniel served. The optics are terrible. That contract was awarded based on merit. We had the best bid. I'm sure that's true, but it looks like nepotism. It looks like you used your husband's connections to secure government business. Victoria's free hand clenched into a fist. Daniel had been retired for 2 years when we won that contract. He had nothing to do with the decision. Can you prove that? Can they prove otherwise? They don't have to. The appearance of impropriety is enough. Cartwright paused. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I suggest you prepare a very good explanation. He hung up before Victoria could respond. Daniel watched her face. What is it? Victoria set down her phone carefully, afraid she might throw it otherwise. They found a connection between your service record and one of our government contracts. They're implying we committed fraud. That's absurd. Of course it's absurd. But it doesn't matter. They're going to use this to force me out. Sophie looked up from her ice cream, sensing the shift in mood. Mom, are you okay? Victoria forced a smile. I'm fine, baby. Just work stuff. But she wasn't fine. She was furious. Furious at Cartwright's obvious opportunism. Furious at the media for creating connections that didn't exist. Furious at the world for refusing to leave them alone. And underneath the fury, a growing dread. Because she could see the path forward now, could see exactly how this would play out. The board would demand answers she couldn't provide. The press would run with the fraud angle. Competitors would smell blood in the water. Everything she'd built, 12 years of work, of sacrifice, of proving herself, could crumble because of a connection that existed only in the minds of people looking for scandal. They drove home in silence, the brief normalcy of ice cream already feeling like a distant memory. The reporters had multiplied, now spilling onto neighboring properties. Someone had set up a food truck to feed them. This is insane, Victoria muttered, navigating through the crowd to their garage. Inside, Sophie went upstairs to do homework, while Daniel and Victoria retreated to the kitchen. Victoria pulled up the contract files on her laptop, reviewing every detail, looking for anything that could be misinterpreted. Here, she said, pointing at the screen. The approval came from Colonel Sarah Martinez. I've never met her. You've never mentioned her. There's no connection. But Daniel leaned over her shoulder, reading. Martinez was 2 divisions over from mine. We might have been in the same building once or twice, but that's it. Can she confirm that? If someone asks her, probably. But Victoria, you're not going to win this with facts. Cartwright doesn't care about the truth. He cares about leverage. Then what do you suggest? Fight back. You're a brilliant CEO. You've grown that company into something incredible. Don't let them make you defensive. Go on offense. Victoria looked up at him. How? Show them the contract was awarded fairly. Show them the bidding process. Show them that Hailtech won because you were the best, not because of who you married. Make them prove their accusations instead of you proving your innocence. It was good advice. Strategic. The kind of thinking that had probably made Daniel an excellent officer. Victoria spent the next 3 hours preparing. She pulled every document related to that contract, every email, every evaluation. She built a timeline showing Daniel's retirement date versus the contract award date, 18 months apart. She found the scoring rubrics that showed Hailtech's bid was objectively superior. By 10 p.m., she had an airtight case. By 11 p.m., she was exhausted but ready. Daniel brought her tea and sat beside her at the kitchen table. You're going to destroy them tomorrow. I hope so. I know so. I've seen you in CEO mode. It's terrifying. Victoria managed a small smile. You've never actually seen me in a board meeting. Don't need to. I see how you handle everything else. You're unstoppable when you commit to something. The compliment settled warm in her chest. I'm sorry this is affecting your life too. Our life. It's affecting our life, and we'll get through it. Victoria leaned against him, letting herself be held. Outside, the reporters were still there, camping out for the night. Upstairs, Sophie was asleep, innocent and safe. And here, in their kitchen, they were just 2 people trying to navigate an impossible situation. Daniel? Yeah? When you said you'd do whatever it takes to protect us, what did you mean exactly? He was quiet for a moment. I mean that I've spent my entire adult life learning how to identify threats and neutralize them. I know how to disappear if we need to. I know how to create new identities. I know how to ensure you and Sophie would be safe even if I couldn't be there. Victoria pulled back to look at him. You've thought about this, about having to run. I've thought about every scenario. It's how I was trained. That's a lonely way to live. It was, until I met you. They went to bed eventually, though neither of them slept well. Victoria kept running through her presentation for the board. Daniel kept getting up to check the windows, the doors, the security system he'd installed himself 2 years ago. At 3 a.m., Victoria found him standing in Sophie's doorway, watching their daughter sleep. Come to bed, she whispered. In a minute. But she knew that look. The protective vigilance. The father who'd faced war zones now facing something more terrifying, the possibility of failing the people he loved most. She took his hand and led him back to their room, and eventually exhaustion won over worry. Morning came too quickly. Victoria dressed in her armor, a sharp charcoal suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a severe bun, war paint for the boardroom. Daniel made breakfast while she rehearsed her opening statement in the mirror. You've got this, he said, bringing her coffee. I know. Then stop doubting yourself. Victoria smiled despite her nerves. When did you become my cheerleader? About 3 years ago. I've just been subtle about it. At 8:30, Marcus texted. Cartwright brought lawyers. This is serious. Victoria's jaw tightened. Lawyers meant they were going for blood. She kissed Daniel goodbye, hugged Sophie, and drove to Hailtech with her presentation loaded on a USB drive and murder in her eyes. The boardroom felt like an ambush. Cartwright sat at the far end of the table with 2 attorneys flanking him. The other board members looked uncomfortable, caught between loyalty and self-preservation. Victoria didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, connected her laptop to the projector, and began without preamble. 3 years ago, Hailtech won a competitive bid for a military cybersecurity contract. That contract was worth $42 million and was awarded based on merit, evaluation scores, and technical superiority. I have documentation proving every aspect of that process was above board. She clicked through her presentation, Each slide another nail in Cartwright's coffin. The timeline, the scoring rubrics, the evaluators' names, none of whom had any connection to Daniel. The separation between Daniel's retirement and the contract award. Furthermore, Victoria continued, her voice sharp as broken glass, the insinuation that I would risk this company's reputation, my reputation, and commit federal fraud for a single contract is not only insulting, it's strategically idiotic. That contract represents less than 2% of our annual revenue. Why would I risk everything for that? One of Cartwright's lawyers cleared his throat. Mrs. Hayes, while we appreciate your documentation, the appearance of impropriety exists only in the minds of people looking for scandal, Victoria cut him off. And I have to wonder why certain board members are so eager to find it. She turned to face Cartwright directly. James, you've been trying to undermine my position since the day I was appointed CEO. You voted against my appointment. You've opposed every major initiative I've proposed. You tried to force my resignation during the Parker acquisition. And now you're using my husband's past as another weapon in your crusade. I'm not finished. Victoria's voice could have cut steel. I have tolerated your opposition because dissent can be valuable. But this is different. This is a coordinated attack using manufactured scandal to damage this company for your personal agenda. She clicked to her final slide, a graph showing Hailtech's growth under her leadership versus the previous CEO's tenure. These are the facts. Under my leadership, this company has grown 40%. Stock price is up 63%. Employee satisfaction is at an all-time high. We've successfully acquired and integrated 7 companies. We've expanded into 4 new markets. Those are measurable, objective results. Victoria looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. So here's my proposal. You can continue down this path, waste time and resources investigating a connection that doesn't exist, and watch our competitors capitalize on the distraction. Or you can remember that you hired me to lead this company, trust me to continue doing exactly that, and focus on actual business challenges. Silence filled the room. Eleanor Vance spoke first. Victoria, I think you've made your point very clearly. I, for one, am satisfied with this explanation. David Park nodded. Agreed. I see no evidence of impropriety. One by one, the other board members fell in line. Even the ones Victoria knew Cartwright had in his pocket couldn't argue with the data she'd presented. Cartwright's face had gone red. This isn't over. Actually, James, I think it is. Victoria gathered her materials. Unless you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, real evidence, not speculation, I suggest we move on to discussing things that actually matter. Like the Henderson merger you were so concerned about last week. She sat down, her heart pounding, adrenaline singing through her veins. The meeting continued, but the fight had gone out of it. Cartwright was silent, his lawyers useless. Victoria had won. But she felt no satisfaction, because winning this battle didn't change the larger war. The media would still speculate. The questions would still swirl. Daniel's past would still cast shadows over their present. After the meeting, Marcus caught her in the hallway. That was brutal, he said, admiration clear in his voice. Remind me never to make you angry. I'm tired of defending myself for things I didn't do. You shouldn't have to. But Victoria, you need to know, this isn't the end. Cartwright is going to keep looking for ammunition. Let him look. He won't find anything. Marcus hesitated. What about Daniel? Is there anything else from his past that could surface? Victoria thought about Yemen, about Khalil Nazari, about classified missions and enemies who held grudges. I don't know, she admitted, and that's the terrifying part. She drove home feeling hollowed out. The victory should have felt good. Instead, it felt like winning a battle in a war that had no end. Daniel was in the garage when she got home, teaching Sophie how to change a tire on her bicycle. Normal. Domestic. Beautiful. How'd it go? He asked, reading her expression immediately. I won. Cartwright backed down. Then why do you look like you lost? Victoria sank onto the workbench. Because it doesn't matter. Tomorrow there will be another angle, another accusation, another fight. This doesn't end, Daniel. Not until we give them what they want. Which is what? I don't know. The full story? A confession? Blood in the water? She laughed bitterly. I'm starting to understand why you wanted to stay hidden. Sophie looked up from her bicycle. Dad wasn't hidden. He was just being Dad. The simple truth of it hit Victoria like a physical blow. Daniel hadn't been hiding from who he was. He'd been living who he'd chosen to become. And the world couldn't accept that someone could change, could choose peace over violence, could walk away from power and purpose to make pancakes and fix bicycles. "You're right, Bug," Victoria said softly. "He was just being Dad." That night, after Sophie was in bed, Victoria and Daniel sat on their back porch, watching the stars emerge. The reporters out front couldn't see them here, couldn't intrude on this small pocket of peace. "I've been thinking," Daniel said slowly, "about giving them what they want." Victoria's head turned sharply. "What do you mean?" "An interview. One interview, controlled environment, with a journalist we trust. Tell enough of the story that they stop making things up." "You said you'd never do interviews." "I said a lot of things before I realized what this was doing to you, to Sophie, to our life." He looked at her. "If talking about my past makes this go away faster, maybe it's worth it. Or maybe it makes it worse. Maybe it just gives them more ammunition. Maybe. But doing nothing isn't working either." Victoria pulled her knees to her chest, thinking. It went against every instinct she had. Giving the media anything felt like feeding a beast that would never be satisfied. But Daniel had a point. The silence, the mystery, was becoming its own story. "If we do this," she said carefully, "we control every aspect. We choose the journalist, we review the questions in advance, and we set clear boundaries about what's off limits." "Agreed. And if it backfires, then we deal with it, together." That word again. Together. It had become their anchor, their promise, their way of facing the impossible. "Okay," Victoria said finally, "let's do it. But not some cable news hack, someone with credibility, someone who'll tell the story fairly." "I might know someone," Daniel said. "Sarah Chen. She used to cover military affairs for the Times. She's tough but fair, and she understands classified information. She knows what can't be discussed. You know her? She interviewed me once, years ago, for a piece about special operations culture. It never ran. Too sensitive. But I respected her approach." Victoria nodded slowly. "Reach out to her. See if she's interested." Over the next 2 days, Daniel made contact through back channels. Sarah Chen was interested, very interested. She proposed a recorded interview, 90 minutes, with the understanding that certain topics would remain classified. She'd have editorial control, but Daniel and Victoria would have the right to review for factual accuracy and security concerns. It was as good a deal as they were likely to get. The interview was scheduled for Saturday afternoon, in their home, with a small crew, just Sarah, a camera operator, and a sound technician. Victoria insisted on being present, but off camera. Friday night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Victoria found him at 2 a.m., sitting in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee, staring at nothing. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently. "Third and fourth thoughts." He looked exhausted. "I spent 12 years not talking about what I did. The idea of talking about it now, on camera, knowing millions of people will watch." He trailed off. Victoria sat beside him. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do, for Sophie, so she doesn't grow up hearing rumors and speculation, so she can hear the truth from me first. Then focus on that, not the millions of strangers, just Sophie." Daniel nodded, but the tension didn't leave his shoulders. Saturday arrived too quickly. The crew showed up at exactly 2 p.m., professional and efficient. Sarah Chen was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed and intelligent, with the kind of presence that inspired trust. She shook Daniel's hand firmly. "Captain Hayes, it's been a long time." "Just Daniel now, and thank you for doing this." "But thank you for trusting me with it." They set up in the living room, lights and cameras positioned to create an intimate feel. Victoria watched from the kitchen, her stomach in knots. Sarah settled into her chair across from Daniel, notes in her lap, but her focus entirely on him. "Whenever you're ready," the camera operator said. Sarah began with the basics: Daniel's background, his decision to enlist, his progression through special operations training. He answered carefully, providing enough detail to paint a picture without revealing anything classified. Then Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Let's talk about why you left. You were promoted to captain. You had commendations. By all accounts, you were excellent at your job. Why walk away? Daniel's expression softened. I became a father, and I realized that being excellent at my job meant being absent from my daughter's life. I'd already missed too much. I wasn't willing to miss more. That must have been a difficult decision. It was the easiest decision I ever made. Being a soldier was what I did. Being Sophie's father is who I am. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Sarah continued, gentle but probing. Let's talk about the incident that brought you back into the public eye. When you saw that truck crash, that armed individual, what went through your mind? I saw a threat. I saw 50 people in danger. And I saw that I was probably the only person in that plaza with the training to handle it without anyone getting hurt. Were you afraid? Daniel considered the question. No. Fear is a luxury you can't afford in moments like that. You assess, you act, you hope you made the right call. And this time you did. This time, yes. But there were times during my service when the outcome wasn't as clean. When people got hurt despite my best efforts. Those are the moments that stay with you. It was the most honest thing Victoria had heard him say about his past. Not boasting, not deflecting, just raw truth. Sarah asked about the transition to civilian life, about meeting Victoria, about building a new identity. Daniel answered with the same careful honesty, revealing enough to satisfy curiosity without exposing their entire lives. Then Sarah asked the question Victoria had been dreading. There are people online speculating about your specific missions, trying to piece together your service record. Some of the theories are quite elaborate. What do you say to that? Daniel's expression hardened slightly. I say that some information remains classified for good reason. Not to protect me, but to protect methods, sources, and people who are still serving. The specifics of what I did, where I did it, and who I did it with, that's not my story to tell. It belongs to my country and to the people I served with. Even if people accuse you of hiding something, let them accuse. I know what I did. The people who need to know. Everyone else will have to live with uncertainty. It was a perfect answer, firm without being defensive, honest about the limits. The interview concluded after 90 minutes, just as planned. Sarah thanked them both, promised to send a rough cut for review within a week, and left with her crew. The house felt eerily quiet after they were gone. How do you feel? Victoria asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. Like I just ran a marathon. But okay, I think it went okay. It went better than okay. You were honest without being revealing, human without being vulnerable. It was perfect. We'll see what people think when it airs. The interview ran the following Wednesday on network television, primetime. 23 million people watched Daniel Hayes explain himself to the world. The response was overwhelming. Social media exploded with support. Military veterans praised his service and his decision to prioritize fatherhood. Parents called him a role model. Even some of the conspiracy theorists backed off, satisfied with his explanation about classified information. There were still detractors. There always would be. People who thought he was hiding something sinister. People who accused him of being too closed off. But they were drowned out by the positive response. Most importantly, Sophie watched it with them, curled up between her parents on the couch, and when it was over, she looked up at Daniel with shining eyes. I'm proud of you, Dad. And that, Victoria realized, was worth all of it. Every moment of stress, every board meeting battle, every sleepless night, because their daughter understood now, understood who her father had been, who he'd chosen to become, and why. The media attention didn't disappear overnight, but it shifted. The questions became less invasive. The speculation died down. After 2 weeks, a celebrity scandal broke and the cameras finally left their street. Life began to return to something resembling normal. Sophie went back to school, where the other parents had apparently decided that having a hero dad was actually pretty cool. The principal apologized for the overreaction. Sophie's social status had somehow improved. Victoria's board meeting the following month was remarkably civil. Even Cartwright was subdued, his attempted coup having failed spectacularly. And Daniel went back to being dad, making pancakes, fixing bicycles, existing in the quiet life he'd fought so hard to build. But something had changed. Victoria saw it in the way neighbors looked at him now, with respect, yes, but also a kind of wariness. He was no longer just the friendly single dad who fixed things. He was the man who'd done things they couldn't imagine. She saw it in the way Daniel carried himself, too. A little less relaxed, a little more aware. Like a door he'd carefully closed had been forced back open, and he couldn't quite shut it again. One evening, 3 weeks after the interview aired, Victoria found him in the garage, not fixing anything, just sitting. "Hey," she said softly, sitting beside him on the workbench. "Hey. You okay?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Remember when I said I'd left that life behind? That I'd chosen to be someone different? Yeah. I think I was lying to myself." He looked at his hands. "You don't stop being a soldier just because you take off the uniform. The training is still there. The instincts, the ability to assess threats and calculate responses. I thought I'd buried it, but it was just sleeping. And now it's awake. And now everyone knows it's there, including me." Victoria took his hand. "Does that scare you?" "A little. Because part of me liked who I was. Liked the clarity of purpose, the sense of being good at something important. And I'm afraid that part might want back in." "Do you want back in?" Daniel looked at her, his eyes clear and honest. "No, I want this life, this family. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a small part of me that misses the simplicity of having a clear mission." Victoria understood that. She felt the same way sometimes about the early days of Hale Tech, when it was just her and a handful of engineers building something from nothing, before the board meetings and the politics and the weight of thousands of employees depending on her decisions. "Maybe we don't get to be just one thing," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe we're both complicated. You're a father and a former soldier. I'm a CEO and a wife. Those things don't cancel each other out." "No, but they don't always fit together easily either." "Nothing worth having fits together easily." Daniel smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen in days. "When did you get so wise?" "I married you, didn't I?" He pulled her close, and they sat together in the garage surrounded by tools and half-finished projects and the comfortable mess of a life being lived. And for the first time since that truck had crashed into the plaza and changed everything, Victoria felt like maybe they'd actually survive this. Maybe they'd come out stronger, together. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, unmarked and hand-delivered to Victoria's office. Her assistant brought it in with the regular mail, but something about it immediately caught Victoria's attention. No return address, no postage. Just her name written in precise block letters across plain white paper. Marcus was in her office reviewing quarterly projections when she opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Victoria's blood turned to ice. It was Daniel, but not the Daniel she knew. This was Captain Hayes, younger by a decade, in full tactical gear, standing in what looked like a desert landscape. 5 other men were in the photo, their faces blurred out. But Daniel's face was crystal clear, and in the bottom corner, written in the same precise block letters, "Some ghosts don't stay buried." Marcus leaned over her shoulder and went pale. "What the hell is that?" Victoria's hands were shaking. She forced them still, her mind racing through possibilities. A threat? A warning? Someone from Daniel's past making their presence known? "I need to call him," she said, reaching for her phone. Daniel answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" "Someone sent me a photo of you from your military days." Victoria tried to keep her voice steady. "It came to my office, hand-delivered." The silence on the other end was deafening. "What does it say?" Daniel's voice had changed, harder, colder. The soldier's voice. She read him the message. "Don't touch it again," Daniel said immediately. "Don't let anyone else touch it. I'm coming to you right now. Daniel, lock your office door. Stay inside until I get there. 20 minutes. He hung up before she could argue. Marcus was staring at her. "Victoria, what's going on?" "I don't know." But that was a lie. She knew exactly what this was. The thing Daniel had warned her about. People from his past. Enemies with long memories. Daniel arrived in 15 minutes, which meant he'd driven too fast and broken several traffic laws. He walked into her office like he owned it, his entire demeanor transformed. This wasn't the gentle father who made pancakes. This was the operator, the soldier, the man trained to identify and eliminate threats. He examined the envelope without touching it, eyes scanning for details Victoria couldn't even identify. Then he looked at the photograph with an expression she'd never seen before. Recognition. And something that might have been fear. "You know who sent this," she said quietly. Daniel nodded slowly. I have an idea. Who? A name I hoped you'd never have to hear. He finally looked at her, and Victoria saw the weight of old choices in his eyes. Khalil Nazari, the man I told you about, from Yemen. Marcus had been standing by the window, pretending not to listen. Now he turned. I'm calling security. No. Daniel's voice was sharp. Corporate security won't help here. This is beyond their scope. Then what do we do? Victoria asked, hating how small her voice sounded. We assume this is a message, a way of saying, I know where you are, I know what matters to you. The question is whether it's just psychological warfare or a prelude to something more. Victoria sank into her chair. How did he find you? The interview. Had to be. It aired internationally. Someone recognized me, made the connection, and now... Daniel picked up the photo with his sleeve, studying it more carefully. This photo was taken in 2017. The operation was classified. The only people who would have access to it are intelligence agencies and the people we were targeting. Meaning Nazari has intelligence connections. Or he's bought them. Money opens a lot of doors. Daniel set the photo down. Victoria, I need you to listen carefully. This is serious. If Nazari is making himself known, it's not random, it's calculated. Marcus stepped forward. What does he want? Revenge? Or leverage? Maybe both. Daniel turned to Victoria. I need to make some calls. Reach out to people I haven't talked to in years. Find out what Nazari's been doing, where he is, what his capabilities are. And in the meantime? In the meantime, we're careful. You vary your route to work. You don't go anywhere alone. Sophie stays close. But Victoria felt reality tilting again. The normal world she'd fought so hard to reclaim slipping away. This is insane. We can't live like this. We won't have to live like this long. I'll handle it. How exactly do you handle someone like that? Daniel's jaw tightened. The same way I handled him before, carefully and completely. There was something in his tone that sent a chill down Victoria's spine. This was the part of Daniel she'd never seen, the part that existed in classified files and redacted reports, the part that did things that gave other people nightmares. Marcus cleared his throat. I'm going to step out, give you two some privacy. After he left, Victoria and Daniel stood in silence, the photograph between them like a landmine. I'm sorry, Daniel said finally. I thought I'd left this behind. Thought the distance and the years would be enough. You can't outrun your past, Victoria replied, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. I'm learning that the hard way. If you want to take Sophie and leave for a while, absolutely not. We don't run. We face this. She stood, moving around the desk to stand in front of him. You said we handle this together. Did you mean it? Yes. But Victoria, you don't understand what you're saying. These aren't boardroom battles. These are people who solve problems with violence. Then you'll teach me. You'll tell me what to watch for, what to be aware of, how to stay safe. And we'll get through this the same way we got through everything else. Daniel looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're not scared. I'm terrified, but I'm also tired of being passive, tired of reacting to whatever gets thrown at us. Victoria picked up the photograph, really looking at it now. The young soldier staring back at her seemed like a stranger. Tell me about this operation. I want to know what we're dealing with. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. He pulled two chairs together and they sat. And for the next hour, he told her things he'd never told anyone outside of military debriefings. The mission had been a hostage extraction. An American journalist captured by Nazari's cell, held in a compound outside Sana'a. Daniel's team had 48 hours to get him out before the execution video was scheduled to air. They'd gone in at night, 6 operators against 30 militants. The extraction itself had been clean. They'd gotten the journalist out alive. But the exfiltration had gone wrong, an ambush they hadn't anticipated. 2 of Daniel's men had died buying time for the others to escape. The journalist survived. The intelligence he provided led to strikes that dismantled Nazari's network. But Nazari himself had escaped, disappearing into the chaos of the region's endless conflicts. I should have killed him when I had the chance, Daniel said quietly. We had eyes on him twice during that operation. Both times, I made the call to prioritize the mission objective over the target of opportunity. That was the right call. Was it? Because now he's here, threatening my family, and those two men still died for nothing. Victoria took his hand. They didn't die for nothing. They died protecting someone who couldn't protect himself. That matters. Does it? When the person I saved goes on to become a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist while the men who died for him are barely remembered? There was bitterness there, old and deep. Victoria had never heard it in Daniel's voice before. What was the journalist's name? She asked. Marcus Chen. Victoria froze. Marcus? Our Marcus? Daniel looked up sharply. What? Marcus Chen, my second in command. He's a journalist by training. Won a Pulitzer in 2019 for investigative reporting before he moved into corporate communications. Her mind was racing. He never mentioned serving in Yemen, never mentioned being captured. Most people don't advertise their trauma. Victoria stood, pacing. But he works for me, has worked for me for a decade, and he never once mentioned that you saved his life? He doesn't know. The extraction team was masked. We never identified ourselves. As far as he knows, he was rescued by nameless soldiers who disappeared into the night. We have to tell him. Why? What purpose does it serve except to create obligation where there shouldn't be any? Victoria understood his point, but something about the coincidence bothered her. In a city of millions, what were the odds that the man Daniel saved would end up working for Daniel's wife? Unless it wasn't coincidence at all. She returned to her desk and pulled up Marcus's employment file. Hired 10 years ago, shortly after Daniel had retired from service. Impressive credentials, excellent references. But now Victoria was looking at it through a different lens, searching for connections she'd never thought to look for before. When exactly did you retire? She asked Daniel. March 2018. Why? Victoria checked the date on Marcus's application. Marcus applied to Hailtech in June 2018, 3 months later. Daniel came to stand beside her, reading over her shoulder. That could still be coincidence. Could be. But you don't believe in coincidence, do you? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Victoria picked up her phone and called Marcus back to the office. He arrived within minutes, his expression concerned. Is everything okay? He asked. That depends, Victoria said carefully. Marcus, I need you to be completely honest with me. How did you end up working at Hailtech? Marcus blinked, surprised by the question. I applied. You interviewed me. I got the job. But why Hailtech specifically? You were a successful journalist, Pulitzer winner. You could have worked anywhere. I was tired of conflict zones, tired of risking my life for stories. I wanted something stable, something safe. He looked between them, clearly confused. Why are you asking me this now? Daniel spoke up, his voice neutral. Marcus, have you ever been to Yemen? The change in Marcus's expression was instant, color drained from his face. His hands clenched. How do you know about that? Answer the question. Yes, in 2017, I was there covering the Civil War and I was captured, held for 3 days before I was rescued. Marcus's voice was tight. It's not something I talk about. Victoria and Daniel exchanged glances. The team that rescued you, Daniel said carefully. Did you ever find out who they were? No, it was a military operation, classified. I tried to find out afterward, wanted to thank them, but the Pentagon stonewalled me, said the details were need to know, and I didn't need to know. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Why? Do you know something about it? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolled through photos, and showed Marcus a picture. It was the same photo from the envelope, but a different angle. The same 6 operators. The same desert landscape. Marcus stared at it, his breath catching. Where did you get this? I was there, Daniel said simply. I led that operation. I'm the one who pulled you out of that compound. The silence in the office was absolute. Marcus sank into a chair, his hands shaking. All this time, I didn't know you were the same person. You never mentioned it. I never asked. Because I was trying to forget it ever happened. Because I still have nightmares about that room, that voice counting down in Arabic, the certainty that I was going to die. Marcus looked up at Daniel with something like awe. You saved my life. My team saved your life. 2 of them died doing it. The weight of those words settled over the room like a shroud. Marcus closed his eyes. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't know. No one did. That's how these things work. Daniel sat down across from him. But I need to ask you something important. When you applied to work here, did anyone suggest it? Recommend Hailtech specifically? Marcus frowned, thinking. A former colleague mentioned it, said they were looking for someone with my background. But that was normal networking, wasn't it? Who was the colleague? Sarah Chen. She'd covered military affairs before moving to the Times. We'd worked together on several stories. Victoria's stomach dropped. Sarah Chen. The journalist who'd interviewed Daniel, who'd known about his past, his service, his connection to classified operations. And she recommended you come to Hailtech specifically? Daniel pressed. She said it would be a good fit, that they valued people with journalistic ethics and international experience. Marcus was starting to look worried. Why? What's going on? Daniel showed him the photograph that had arrived that morning, the message written at the bottom. Marcus went white. Nazari, you know the name. Of course I know the name. He's the one who held me, who was going to execute me on camera. Marcus stood abruptly. Is he here? In the country? We don't know, but he's making his presence known. Then you need to leave, both of you. Take Sophie and disappear. That man is a monster. He's capable of anything. We're not running, Victoria said firmly. Then you're being idiots. Marcus's voice rose. You don't understand what he's like, what he'll do. I spent 3 days listening to him describe exactly how he was going to kill me. He's not just violent, he's strategic, patient. He'll wait for the perfect moment to strike. Daniel's expression was grim. I know exactly what he's like. I've read his profile, studied his methods. That's why we're going to be smarter than him. How? By figuring out his endgame. He didn't send that photo just to scare us. He wants something. Victoria's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Hayes? The voice was cultured, accented, calm. I hope you received my message. Every muscle in Victoria's body tensed. She hit the speaker button so Daniel and Marcus could hear. Who is this? Someone from your husband's past. Someone with a long memory and even longer reach. A soft laugh. I imagine he's there with you now. Hello, Captain Hayes. It's been a long time. Daniel's face was carved from stone. Nazari, you remember? I'm touched, though I suppose I'm rather unforgettable, aren't I? You certainly remembered me well enough to destroy everything I built. You were holding an innocent man hostage, planning to murder him on camera. What did you expect? I expected professional courtesy, a negotiation, not a midnight raid that cost me 30 men and 7 years of work. The voice hardened. But we learn from our mistakes, don't we, Captain? I certainly have. Victoria found her voice. What do you want? Ah, the formidable Mrs. Hayes. I've been reading about you. Quite impressive, building an empire like that. $9 billion, is it? Such an achievement. He paused. I want what you took from me, Captain. My organization, my reputation, my future. Since I can't have those back, I'll settle for taking yours instead. Daniel's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Leave them alone. This is between you and me. But it's not, is it? You made it about them when you chose them over your duty, when you walked away from being a soldier to play house with a daughter and a billionaire wife. You thought you could have a normal life? After what you've done? After the men you've killed? I did my job, following orders, protecting my country. And I was protecting mine. Funny how perspective works. Nazari's voice dripped with false sympathy. Here's what's going to happen, Captain. You have 72 hours to make a choice. You can come to me, alone, unarmed, and we'll settle this like men. Or I'll start taking pieces of your new life, starting with the people you love most. If you touch my family, you'll what? Hunt me down? Kill me? Please. You had your chance for that 7 years ago, and you chose the mission over the kill. You chose mercy over pragmatism. That weakness is why we're having this conversation now. Victoria's mind was racing. You're bluffing. You're nowhere near us. This is all psychological manipulation. Am I? The voice took on an amused tone. Tell me, Mrs. Hayes, does your daughter still wear that purple backpack to school? The one with the unicorn patch on the front pocket? She's quite adorable, by the way. Reminds me of my own daughter at that age. The room went deathly silent. If you go near her, Daniel's voice was barely human, I will end you. 72 hours, Captain. Think carefully about your choice, because unlike you, I don't have any moral qualms about collateral damage. The line went dead. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Daniel was on his phone, calling a number from memory, his voice clipped and professional. I need a security detail, full coverage, 1 adult female, 1 7-year-old child, immediate deployment. He listened briefly. I don't care what it costs. Just get them here now. He hung up and turned to Victoria. Pack a bag. You're going to a secure location. Like hell I am. This isn't negotiable. You're right, it's not. Victoria stood her ground. I'm not hiding while you deal with this alone. We're in this together, remember? Victoria, he threatened Sophie. I know, which is why we need to be smart, not reactive. She turned to Marcus. Call the school. Tell them Sophie is being picked up by a private car service. Give them the password we set up for emergencies. Marcus nodded and immediately pulled out his phone. Daniel was staring at her. What are you doing? What I do best, strategic planning. Victoria moved to her whiteboard, grabbing a marker. Nazari wants you to panic, to make emotional decisions. That's his leverage, so we don't give it to him. He knows where Sophie goes to school. Then we move her, today. There are private schools with actual security, gated campuses. We can have her enrolled by tomorrow. And us? We bring in professionals, real security, not corporate rent-a-cops. And we figure out what Nazari actually wants because I don't buy that this is just about revenge. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. You're right. Revenge is emotional. Nazari is calculating. There's something else. Marcus finished his call. School is sending Sophie to the main office. They'll hold her there until authorized pickup arrives. But Victoria, what private school can process an emergency enrollment in 24 hours? Leave that to me. Victoria was already pulling up contacts on her computer. She'd donated to half the private schools in the city. Someone owed her a favor. Within an hour, a 3-person security team had arrived at the office. They were ex-military, vetted by Daniel's former unit commander, and utterly professional. One of them was dispatched immediately to collect Sophie. The lead security officer, a woman named Sarah Rodriguez, assessed the situation with calm efficiency. Mr. Hayes, based on the threat profile you've described, I'm recommending we move both you and your family to a secure facility while we assess the actual risk level. No, Daniel said immediately. That's what he expects. We stay visible, but protected. Force him to make a move instead of controlling the board. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. That's aggressive. That's how you deal with someone like Nazari. You don't hide. You make yourself a harder target than he anticipated and wait for him to make a mistake. Victoria watched this exchange with growing understanding. This was Daniel's world, the strategic calculations, the risk assessment, the cold logic of threat management. And she realized something that should have terrified her but didn't. She trusted him completely. All right, Rodriguez said. Then we set up layered security, mobile protection for all 3 of you. Secure your residence, monitor communications. And we prepare contingencies in case the threat escalates. Agreed, Daniel said. But I need one more thing. I need information. Everything you can find on Khalil Nazari's current location, resources, and known associates. That's intelligence gathering. That's beyond our scope. I can help with that, Marcus said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. I still have contacts in the intelligence community, people who owe me favors from my journalism days. If Nazari is in the country, someone will know. Daniel studied him. You don't have to do this. You saved my life. 2 of your men died saving my life. If I can help protect yours now, I will. The debt between them was palpable, ancient, and binding. Okay, Daniel said finally, but be careful. If Nazari has intelligence sources, he might be monitoring for exactly this kind of inquiry. I know how to be subtle. As Marcus left to make calls, Victoria moved closer to Daniel. Are you okay? No, but I will be. He looked at her, and for the first time since this started, she saw vulnerability there. I'm sorry I brought this into your life. You didn't bring it. It followed you. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, because you chose to leave that world. You chose us. Whatever happens next, that choice matters. Sophie arrived 30 minutes later, escorted by 2 security personnel and looking both confused and excited. Dad, these people said you sent them. Are you guys spies or something? Despite everything, Daniel smiled. Not quite, Bug, but we need to talk about some changes. They gathered in Victoria's office, Sophie sitting on the couch between her parents, while Rodriguez stood by the door. Sweetheart, Victoria began carefully, remember how we talked about Dad's old job? How he used to be a soldier? Sophie nodded, her expression serious. Well, someone from that time is being difficult. Not dangerous, she added quickly, seeing Sophie's eyes widen. Just difficult. So we're going to have some extra protection for a little while. These people, she gestured to Rodriguez, are going to make sure we're all safe. Like bodyguards? Exactly like bodyguards. Sophie processed this with the adaptability of childhood. Cool. Can I tell Emma? Maybe let's keep this between us for now, Daniel said gently. It's a family thing. Okay. Sophie leaned against him. Are you scared, Dad? Daniel pulled her close. I'm cautious. Being scared isn't useful. Being prepared is. That sounds like something a soldier would say. Yeah, Bug, it does. They spent the night in a hotel suite that Rodriguez's team had secured, with rotating guards and security protocols that felt like something from a spy thriller. Sophie thought it was an adventure. Victoria and Daniel barely slept. At 3 a.m., Victoria found Daniel standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. Can't sleep? She asked quietly. Too much running through my head. She joined him at the window. Tell me. I'm running scenarios, trying to think like he thinks, figure out his next move. And? He's not going to come at us directly. That's too risky, too exposed. He'll look for leverage, something he can use to control the situation. Like what? Daniel turned to face her. Like your company. Victoria, Hailtech has government contracts, defense contracts. If Nazari can compromise those, use them as leverage, he could force my hand without ever touching you or Sophie physically. Victoria's mind immediately jumped to the implications. He could threaten to expose fabricated security breaches, make it look like we've been compromised. The government would cancel our contracts, the stock would crash. And you'd be vulnerable, desperate, willing to make deals. Deals like handing you over, Daniel nodded grimly. It's what I would do if I were him. Then we get ahead of it. I'll call the FBI in the morning, report the threat. Get official protection and put them on notice that any security allegations should be viewed with extreme skepticism. That might trigger exactly what we're trying to avoid. Or it might put Nazari on his back foot, make him realize he's not dealing with helpless victims. They stood in silence, 2 people who'd built a life together now defending it against threats they'd never anticipated. Victoria. Yeah? If this goes wrong, if he somehow gets to me, promise me you'll take Sophie somewhere safe, somewhere he can't find you. Daniel, promise me. Victoria looked into his eyes and saw the soldier there, the man who calculated casualties and acceptable losses, who was willing to sacrifice himself if it meant protecting them. No, she said firmly. What? I'm not promising that, because we're not losing you. We're not letting him win. We're going to outsmart him, outmaneuver him, and send him running back to whatever hole he crawled out of. You can't know that. Watch me. Victoria's voice was steel. I didn't build a $9 billion company by accepting defeat. I fight for what's mine. And you're mine, Daniel Hayes. So is our daughter. So is this life we've built. And I'll be damned if I let some ghost from your past take any of it away. Daniel pulled her close, and she felt him trembling slightly. Not from fear, from something else. Relief, maybe, or hope. I love you, he whispered. I love you too. Now let's get some sleep. Tomorrow we start fighting back. But sleep didn't come easily. Because somewhere in the darkness, Khalil Nazari was making plans, and the clock was already ticking down on their 72 hours. Morning arrived with Marcus's call at 6 a.m. Victoria answered on the second ring, already awake, coffee in hand. I found something, Marcus said without preamble. Nazari isn't working alone. He's got backing from someone with serious resources. Victoria put him on speaker so Daniel could hear. What kind of resources? The kind that can get someone into the country without appearing on any official manifests. The kind that has access to diplomatic channels and intelligence networks. Marcus paused. I talked to a contact at State Department Intelligence. Off the record, completely deniable. He told me there's been chatter about a private security firm called Sentinel Global. They operate in the gray areas, not quite mercenaries, not quite legitimate. And they've been linked to Nazari's network in the past. Daniel leaned forward. Sentinel Global. I know them. They recruit former intelligence officers and special operations personnel. Expensive and effective. And currently operating in the United States, Marcus continued. They have a front office in New York. Perfectly legal on paper. But my contact says they've been flagged for possible weapons trafficking and illegal surveillance. Victoria felt a chill. So Nazari has professional operators backing him up. It looks that way, which means this isn't just one man with a grudge. This is organized, well-funded, and strategically planned. Daniel's expression was grim. Did your contact say anything about their current activities? Any operations in our city? He couldn't confirm specifics without raising red flags. But he did mention that Sentinel Global recently secured a contract with a local cybersecurity firm. Want to guess which one? Victoria's blood ran cold. Please don't say Redstone Technologies. Redstone Technologies. Your biggest competitor. The company that lost the military contract to Hailtech 3 years ago. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about destroying everything Daniel and Victoria had built, systematically and completely. They're going to use Redstone to fabricate evidence of a security breach, Victoria said, her mind racing. Make it look like Hailtech's systems were compromised. The military will revoke our contracts, our stock will crater, and Redstone will swoop in to pick up the pieces. While Nazari gets his revenge and makes a fortune in the process, Daniel finished, it's actually brilliant. It's also attempted corporate espionage and fraud, Victoria countered, which gives us ammunition. Rodriguez had entered the room during the conversation, listening intently. If we can prove the connection between Nazari and Sentinel Global, and between Sentinel and Redstone, we can get federal authorities involved. This becomes bigger than a personal vendetta. We'd need hard evidence, Marcus said over the speaker. Not just intelligence chatter, something that would hold up in court. Victoria was already moving, pulling up her laptop. Then we get evidence. Redstone's CEO is Thomas Brennan. He's ambitious, aggressive, and not particularly subtle. If he's working with Sentinel Global, there'll be a paper trail. Corporate records are protected, Rodriguez pointed out. Not if they involve illegal activity. Victoria's fingers flew over the keyboard. Marcus, can your State Department contact get us information on Sentinel Global's contracts, specifically their arrangement with Redstone? Possibly, but it'll take time. We don't have time. We have... Victoria checked her watch. 64 hours before Nazari's deadline. Daniel stood, pacing with the restless energy of a caged predator. We need to force their hand, make them move before they're ready. How? Rodriguez asked. By giving them what they think they want. Daniel turned to Victoria. What if we leak information suggesting Hailtech is vulnerable, make Redstone think this is the perfect time to strike? Victoria immediately saw where he was going. If they move prematurely, they'll make mistakes, get sloppy. Exactly. They've been planning this carefully, waiting for the right moment. But if they think the opportunity is slipping away, they'll rush, and rushing leads to errors. Rodriguez looked skeptical. That's a risky strategy. If you miscalculate, you could actually tank your company. Better than waiting for them to do it on their timeline, Victoria said. She was already drafting an email in her mind. I can send a memo to the board expressing concerns about our security infrastructure. Make it sound worried, uncertain. If Redstone has people monitoring our communications, and I'm sure they do, they'll see it as weakness. And they'll pounce, Daniel agreed. But we'll be ready for them. Sophie emerged from the bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Why is everyone up so early? Victoria immediately shifted gears, her voice softening. Just some work stuff, honey. Want some breakfast? Can we go home today? The question hit Victoria harder than she expected. Home. The place they'd built together. The life they were fighting to protect. Soon, Bug, Daniel promised, scooping her up despite her protests that she was too old to be carried. Very soon. After breakfast, Rodriguez took Sophie to the private school they'd enrolled her in, Westbrook Academy, with its gated campus and actual security protocols. Victoria and Daniel headed to Hail Tech, riding in separate vehicles with security details, the entire operation feeling surreal. At the office, Victoria called an emergency meeting with her senior leadership team. She needed people she trusted, people who could help execute what was essentially a corporate counterintelligence operation. The conference room filled quickly. Marcus, of course. Eleanor Vance from the board, David Park, and Michael Torres, Hail Tech's head of IT security, a former NSA analyst who'd left government work for the private sector. Victoria laid out the situation with brutal honesty. The threat from Nazari, the connection to Sentinel Global, the suspected involvement of Redstone Technologies. So we're being targeted for corporate espionage backed by a terrorist, Eleanor summarized, her usual calm demeanor cracking slightly. That's a new one. The question is how we respond, Victoria said. We can go to federal authorities, which might protect us but would also expose everything publicly. Or we can handle this internally and turn the tables on them. Michael Torres leaned forward. If Redstone is planning to fabricate evidence of a security breach, they'll need access to our systems. Have there been any unusual penetration attempts? Any suspicious activity? I've been monitoring since yesterday, he said, pulling up data on the conference room screen. And yes, there's been increased probing of our firewalls. Nothing successful yet, but they're definitely testing our defenses. Can you trace the source? I'm working on it. But whoever's doing this knows what they're doing. They're routing through multiple proxy servers using sophisticated obfuscation techniques. Sentinel Global level techniques, Daniel observed. Exactly. Victoria made a decision. Michael, I want you to create a honeypot, a fake vulnerability in our system that looks real enough to attract their attention. When they take the bait, we trace them all the way back to the source. That could work, Michael said slowly, but it's risky. If they realize it's a trap, they won't, because we're going to make them think they're winning. Victoria turned to the group. I'm going to send that memo I mentioned. Express concern about our security. Suggest we might be vulnerable. They'll see it as confirmation that now is the time to strike. Eleanor shook her head in admiration. You're weaponizing their own strategy against them. I learned from the best, Victoria said, glancing at Daniel. Over the next 6 hours, they orchestrated a carefully choreographed deception. Victoria sent her memo, worded to sound authentic while actually being deliberate bait. Michael Torres created his digital honeypot, a seemingly exploitable vulnerability in Hail Tech's security infrastructure. Marcus reached out to his contacts, gathering more intelligence on Sentinel Global's operations. And Daniel made calls of his own, reaching out to former military colleagues, people who understood the world Nazari operated in. By evening, the trap was set. Victoria was in her office reviewing reports when her phone rang. Unknown number again. Her stomach clenched, but she answered. Mrs. Hayes, you've been busy today. Nazari's voice was amused. All those worried emails about security? All those emergency meetings? One might think you're afraid of something. Victoria forced her voice to remain steady. One might think you're monitoring my private communications, which is illegal. So many things are illegal. Doesn't mean they don't happen. He paused. Your husband isn't with you right now. Where is he? That's none of your concern. Everything about your family is my concern. I've made it my concern. Has he told you about the operation yet? The details of what really happened in Yemen? He's told me enough. Has he told you about the children? Nazari's voice turned cold. The ones who died when his team's extraction went wrong, when they called in airstrikes to cover their escape? Victoria's breath caught. She looked at Daniel, who'd entered the office and could hear the conversation on speaker. His face had gone ashen. I thought not, Nazari continued. Your hero husband didn't mention that part, did he? Didn't mention that his mission to save one American journalist cost the lives of 17 civilians, 13 of them under the age of 12. That's not true, Daniel said, his voice rough. Isn't it? Check the classified after-action reports, Captain. Check the redacted casualty assessments. Your command knows exactly what happened that night. They just chose not to prosecute because the mission was technically successful. Victoria felt sick. Even if that's true, those were decisions made in combat, in impossible situations. Impossible situations I was forced into by his actions, Nazari shot back. You think I'm the monster? I was protecting my people, my community, and your husband turned it into a war zone. You were holding an innocent man hostage and planning to execute him on camera, Daniel said flatly. Don't pretend you're some freedom fighter. You're a terrorist who targeted civilians for political gain. And you're a soldier who killed children and sleeps soundly at night. We're not so different, you and I. We're nothing alike. No? Then why are you so afraid? Why hide behind security teams and bodyguards if you're so righteous in your actions? Nazari's voice took on a mocking tone. 48 hours left, Captain. Tick-tock. The line went dead. Victoria and Daniel sat in silence, the weight of Nazari's words hanging between them. Is it true? Victoria asked quietly. About the children? Daniel's hands were clenched so tight they shook. The airstrike was a last resort. We were pinned down, taking heavy fire, running out of ammunition. I called it in to save my team, to save Marcus. But yes, there were civilian casualties. The intelligence said the compound was military only. It was wrong. How many? 17 confirmed, including children. His voice broke slightly. It's the one decision I can't take back, can't justify, can't make peace with. Victoria moved to him, taking his hands in hers. Daniel, you were in an impossible situation. You made a call to save lives and ended others. That's not a trade-off I get to feel good about. No, but it's also not something you chose out of cruelty or callousness. You were a soldier in a combat zone making split-second decisions. Tell that to those kids' parents. Victoria had no answer for that, because there was no good answer. War was ugly and complicated and left scars that never fully healed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael Torres. They took the bait, attempting to penetrate the honeypot now, tracing back to source. Finally, something was going right. We need to focus, Victoria said, showing Daniel the message. Nazari is trying to throw you off balance with guilt and trauma. Don't let him. Daniel took a deep breath, visibly pulling himself together. You're right, this is a tactic, psychological warfare. Marcus burst into the office, laptop in hand. We've got movement. Sentinel Global just transferred a substantial payment to an offshore account. My contact flagged it because the amount matches exactly what Redstone Technologies paid them 2 weeks ago for security consulting. So the money's moving, Victoria said. They're preparing to execute their plan, which means we need to move faster. Daniel stood, his soldier persona sliding back into place. Michael is tracing their hack attempt. If we can prove Sentinel Global is behind it and tie that back to Redstone and Nazari, we have them. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. We've got a problem. Westbrook Academy just called. Someone tried to access their security system remotely. They shut it down, but whoever it was specifically trying to get information about Sophie. Every muscle in Daniel's body tensed. They're escalating. Or panicking, Victoria countered. Maybe they know we're on to them. Her phone rang again. This time, it was Thomas Brennan, CEO of Redstone Technologies. Victoria answered with ice in her voice. Victoria, I heard about your security concerns. Terrible timing with your military contracts up for renewal. Cut the act, Thomas. I know what you're doing. A pause. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Sentinel Global. The fabricated security breach you're planning. The attempt to destroy Hailtech so you can swoop in and take our contracts. Another pause. Longer this time. Those are serious accusations. With serious evidence to back them up. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to terminate your contract with Sentinel Global immediately. You're going to cease all attempts to compromise Hailtech's systems. And you're going to pray that I don't go to federal authorities with what I already know. And if I don't, then I'll bury you. I'll expose every shady deal you've ever made, every regulation you've skirted, every lie you've told investors. I have the resources and the motivation. Don't test me. Thomas's voice turned cold. You're making a mistake, Victoria. You're in over your head. No, Thomas, you are. Because you partnered with a terrorist and didn't even realize it. Khalil Nazari isn't a legitimate security consultant. He's on international watch lists. And when the FBI connects him to Sentinel Global and Sentinel Global to Redstone, you're going to federal prison. She hung up. Daniel stared at her. That was aggressive. That was necessary. He needed to know we're not backing down. Marcus looked worried. You just declared war on one of the most ruthless CEOs in the industry. He declared war on us first. I'm just making sure he understands the consequences. Victoria's phone immediately started ringing again. Different number. She answered. It was a Nazari, and he was angry. That was foolish, Mrs. Hayes. Very foolish. You think you can threaten my business partners and face no repercussions? Your business partner just realized he's been working with a wanted terrorist. I'd say his repercussions are going to be significant. You've just moved up my timeline. I was going to give you the full 72 hours. Now I'm accelerating everything. Do whatever you want, Nazari. We're ready for you. Are you? Are you ready for what I'm about to do to your precious company, to your reputation, to your family? His voice dropped to something dangerous. You should have stayed quiet. Should have let your husband handle this. Instead, you've guaranteed that everyone you love will suffer. The line went dead. Victoria's hand was shaking as she set down the phone. Maybe she had been too aggressive. Maybe she'd pushed too hard. Daniel took her hand. You did the right thing. He was going to escalate anyway. This way, at least we forced his hand. I hope you're right, Michael Torres called. I've traced the hack attempt. It's definitely Sentinel Global's signature, and I've got something better. I found emails between Thomas Brennan and a Sentinel Global executive discussing the Hail Tech contract. They're not encrypted properly. Complete operational security failure. Can you send those to me? Victoria asked. Already done. You've got enough there to take to federal authorities. Victoria looked at Daniel. We do this now. We go to the FBI with everything we have. Nazari, Sentinel Global, Redstone, all of it. Agreed, but we need protection first, for Sophie especially. Rodriguez nodded. I'm calling in additional support. Former Secret Service. The best protective detail money can buy. The next 3 hours were a blur of activity. Victoria compiled evidence while Marcus coordinated with his FBI contacts. Daniel worked with Rodriguez to upgrade their security protocols. And somewhere across the city, Nazari was planning his next move. By midnight, they had a meeting scheduled with the FBI for the following morning. They had evidence of corporate espionage, illegal surveillance, and connections to a known terrorist. They had testimony from Marcus about his kidnapping and rescue. They had everything they needed to put Nazari away for life. But Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something, that Nazari had one more card to play. She was right. At 2 a.m., every screen in Hail Tech's headquarters lit up simultaneously. Every computer, every monitor, every display. And on each one, the same message appeared. You have 12 hours. Captain Hayes surrenders himself, or I release everything. Every classified detail of his service. Every operation, every casualty, every secret. I'll destroy his reputation, his honor, and his legacy. The world will know exactly what kind of monster you married, Mrs. Hayes. 12 hours. Choose wisely. Victoria stared at the screens, her blood running cold. Nazari had changed the game entirely. This wasn't about corporate espionage anymore. This wasn't about revenge or money or military contracts. This was about destroying Daniel completely, exposing every classified operation he'd ever been part of, putting other soldiers' lives at risk, burning intelligence sources, unraveling years of careful work. And the only way to stop it was for Daniel to sacrifice himself. Daniel stood beside her, his face pale but resolved. I have to go to him. No? Victoria, if he releases those files, then he releases them. We'll deal with the fallout. You don't understand. Those operations are still active. There are people in the field right now whose lives depend on that information staying secret. I can't let them die to protect myself. Victoria turned to face him fully. And I can't let you walk into a trap that will absolutely get you killed. Because that's what this is, Daniel. He's not going to let you live. Even if you surrender, even if you give him everything he wants, he'll kill you anyway. Maybe. But at least those other soldiers will have a chance. What about Sophie? What about us? Don't we deserve a chance? Daniel pulled her close, and Victoria felt him trembling. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not this time. Marcus had been listening from across the room. Now he stepped forward. There might be another way. Both of them turned to him. The files Nazari is threatening to release, they're classified military records, right? Which means they're stored on secure government servers. If he has access to them, he either hacked those servers or he has someone on the inside. Daniel nodded slowly. Probably an inside source. Those systems are nearly impossible to hack from outside. So we find the source. We cut off his access before he can release anything. In 12 hours? It's better than surrendering to a terrorist. Marcus looked at Daniel. You saved my life. Let me help save yours. Victoria's mind was already racing ahead. Michael can help. If there's a leak in the military system, he'll know how to find it. He used to work NSA. Daniel looked between them, conflict clear on his face. The soldier in him wanted to accept responsibility, to sacrifice himself for the mission. But the father, the husband, that part of him wanted to believe there was another way. Okay, he said finally. We try it your way, but if we can't find the source in time, we will, Victoria said firmly. We're not losing you, not today, not to him. She pulled out her phone and called Michael Torres, waking him up with urgent instructions. Then she called her FBI contact, explaining the new situation, the threat against classified information. Within an hour, they had a response. The FBI was taking the threat seriously. They were mobilizing cybersecurity teams to identify the leak. The Pentagon was involved. This had escalated from a personal vendetta to a matter of national security. But they still only had 12 hours. The sun rose over a city that had no idea what was happening in its shadows. Sophie woke up at the secure school surrounded by guards, unaware her father's life hung in the balance. Hailtech's employees arrived for work, walking past the message still displayed on every screen in the building. And in a location unknown, Khalil Nazari waited for his deadline to expire. Victoria hadn't slept. Neither had Daniel. They'd spent the night coordinating with federal authorities, with Michael's cyber team, with anyone who could help identify Nazari's source. At 8 a.m., they got a break. Michael called, his voice tight with excitement. I found anomalous access patterns in the military's classified database. Someone's been pulling files on specific operations, all of them connected to Daniel's service record. The access is coming from within the Pentagon itself. Can you identify who? I'm narrowing it down. Give me another hour. 45 minutes later, they had a name. Colonel Sarah Martinez, the same officer who had approved Hailtech's military contract 3 years ago. The officer Daniel claimed to barely know, but the access logs told a different story. Martinez had been pulling Daniel's files for months, long before the Plaza incident, long before any of this started. I don't understand, Daniel said, staring at the evidence. I met Martinez maybe twice. Brief encounters. We weren't friends. We weren't anything. Victoria's instincts were screaming. Unless she wasn't working for the military anymore. Unless Nazari got to her, recruited her. Marcus pulled up Martinez's recent financial records, something his intelligence contacts had access to. Large deposits, offshore accounts, money that didn't match her military salary. She's been on Nazari's payroll for at least 6 months, Marcus said. He's been planning this for a long time. The FBI moved fast once they had the name. By 10 a.m., Colonel Martinez was in federal custody. By 11, they'd secured her computer and confirmed she'd been the one providing classified information to Nazari. But they hadn't stopped the transfer. At 11:47 a.m., 13 minutes before Nazari's deadline, Michael's phone rang. He answered, listened, then went pale. The files have already been uploaded, encrypted and distributed to multiple servers worldwide. Martinez had them set to automatically release at noon if she didn't input a security code. Can we stop it? Victoria demanded. Not through technical means. The encryption is military grade. It would take months to crack. Daniel closed his eyes. Then I go to him. It's the only way to stop the release. No, Victoria said again, but this time her voice was weaker, because she could see they were out of options. Rodriguez stepped forward. If you're going, you're not going alone. I'll have a team in position. The second we confirm the location. He'll know, Daniel interrupted. Nazari is too smart for that. He'll have countermeasures. The second he detects any kind of support team, he'll trigger the release anyway. So what do you suggest? Daniel looked at Victoria, and she saw goodbye in his eyes. I go alone. unarmed, exactly as he specified. And I trust that the people I love will be okay without me. Daniel, please. He kissed her then, soft and desperate and final. Take care of Sophie. Tell her I love her. Tell her every day. You'll tell her yourself. Victoria. No. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I didn't marry a quitter. I didn't marry someone who gives up when things get hard. We have 13 minutes to figure this out, so we figure it out. Marcus was frantically typing on his laptop. The security code Martinez was supposed to input. Do we know what it is? Why does that matter? Rodriguez asked. She's in custody. She's not inputting anything. But what if someone else could? Marcus looked up, hope dawning in his eyes. The system is expecting a code. It doesn't care who inputs it. If we can figure out what code Martinez was supposed to use, we'd need access to her computer, her files. Michael was already moving. The FBI has those. If I can get remote access, he was on the phone before he finished the sentence, calling his contacts, pulling every favor he had left. 9 minutes until deadline. Michael's fingers flew across his keyboard, negotiating access, navigating security protocols. The FBI was cooperative, but bureaucracy was slow. 7 minutes. Come on, Michael muttered, watching files transfer. There. I'm in Martinez's system. 6 minutes. He pulled up her recent activity, searching for anything that looked like a security code. Files. Emails. Encrypted notes. 4 minutes. There! Marcus pointed at the screen. That sequence. It's a 16-digit code hidden in a draft email. That could be anything, Rodriguez said. Or it could be everything. Michael was already copying it. I'm accessing the release system now. 3 minutes. Victoria's hand found Daniel's. She held on like he was the only solid thing in a world falling apart. 2 minutes. Michael input the code. The screen flickered. 1 minute. It's asking for verification, Michael said, his voice tight. Biometric scan. It needs Martinez's fingerprint. We don't have that, Rodriguez practically shouted. 30 seconds. Wait. Marcus was pulling up another file. Martinez sent Nazari photos of the system interface, including one where her hand is visible on the scanner. If I can isolate that image, enhance it. 20 seconds. Marcus worked faster than Victoria had ever seen anyone work, isolating the image, processing it, converting it to the format the system needed. 10 seconds. I've got it. Uploading now. 5 seconds. The screen went blank. Everyone held their breath. Then, in small green letters, release canceled, files secured. The room erupted in chaos. Relief, victory, disbelief that they'd actually pulled it off. Victoria collapsed into a chair, her legs no longer supporting her weight. Daniel sank beside her, his hand still gripping hers. It's over, she whispered. Not yet. Rodriguez was on her phone. We still need to find Nazari himself. Martinez will know where he is. And she did. Under federal interrogation, faced with charges of treason and espionage, Colonel Sarah Martinez gave up everything. Nazari's location, his resources, his plans, all of it. He'd been operating out of a warehouse on the industrial edge of the city, surrounded by Sentinel global mercenaries, confident that his leverage would force Daniel's surrender. Instead, he got federal agents. The raid happened at sunset. Victoria watched the news coverage from Hailtech's office, Daniel beside her, as tactical teams descended on the warehouse. Nazari tried to run, tried to fight, but there was nowhere left to go. They took him alive, and with his capture came a cascade of arrests. Thomas Brennan of Redstone Technologies, charged with conspiracy. 3 executives at Sentinel Global, a dozen mercenaries. The web of criminal activity unraveled faster than it had been woven. Hailtech's stock, which had dipped during the crisis, rebounded sharply. The military contracts were safe. The company's reputation, if anything, was enhanced by the story of how they'd fought back against corporate espionage. And Daniel Hayes, the quiet single dad who just wanted to make pancakes and fix bicycles, was a national hero all over again. But this time, he didn't retreat from it. This time, he stood in front of cameras with Victoria beside him and told the truth. About his service, about his choices, about the children who died in Yemen and the weight he carried every day. I'm not a hero, he said simply. I'm a man who made impossible choices in impossible situations. Some of those choices saved lives. Some cost lives. I live with both, and I'm trying every day to be better than I was yesterday. The honesty resonated in ways the mystery never had. Veterans reached out, sharing their own stories. Parents thanked him for prioritizing his daughter. People saw him not as a mysterious figure, but as a human being trying to do his best with what he'd been given. 3 days after Nazari's arrest, Victoria stood in her office looking out at the city. Marcus knocked and entered. "The board meeting went well," he said. Cartwright actually apologized. "It was painful to watch." Victoria smiled. "I almost feel bad for him." "Don't, he deserved it." Marcus sat down. "I wanted to thank you, both of you, for everything. We're the ones who should be thanking you. Without your contacts, your knowledge—" "I meant for saving my life," Marcus interrupted. 7 years ago and 3 days ago. Daniel pulled me out of that compound. You pulled all of us out of this mess. I won't forget that." Victoria nodded, accepting the gratitude. "What will you do now?" "Same thing I've been doing. Work hard. Try to deserve the second chance I was given." He stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I think you and Daniel are perfect for each other. You're both stubborn, brilliant, and absolutely terrifying when you commit to something." After he left, Victoria sat alone with her thoughts. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel, picking up Sophie from school. "Want us to grab dinner on the way home?" Home. They could finally go home. "Yes," she texted back. "Get the good pizza. We're celebrating." "What are we celebrating?" "Being alive, being together, being us. Best reason I've ever heard." Victoria gathered her things and headed out, waving to her assistant, nodding to security guards who looked at her with new respect. She'd proven herself not just as a CEO, but as someone who could face impossible odds and win. The drive home felt different, lighter. Like a weight she hadn't fully realized she was carrying had finally lifted. Daniel and Sophie were already there when she arrived. Pizza boxes on the counter, Sophie chattering excitedly about her day at the new school. And then Emma said I should join the soccer team because I'm really fast, and Dad said maybe. "And can I, Mom? Please." Victoria scooped her daughter up. "We'll talk about it, but probably yes." Sophie cheered and ran off to wash her hands. Daniel pulled Victoria close. "You okay?" "I think so. Are you?" "Getting there." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for not letting me give up. For fighting when I was ready to surrender. That's what partners do." "Is it? Because I'm pretty sure most couples don't have to fight off terrorists and corporate espionage." "Most couples are boring." Daniel laughed, and it was the best sound Victoria had heard in weeks. They ate pizza at the dining room table, the three of them, like a normal family on a normal evening. Sophie told jokes. Daniel made terrible puns. Victoria felt happiness settle in her chest, like coming home after a long journey. Later, after Sophie was asleep, Daniel and Victoria sat on the back porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I've been thinking," Daniel said quietly, "about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "I mean, everyone knows who I am now. What I was. There's no going back to being invisible." Victoria took his hand. "Do you want to go back?" Daniel considered the question carefully. "No. I think I was hiding from myself as much as from the world, pretending I could completely separate from who I used to be. But that's not realistic. I'm both people, the soldier and the father, and maybe that's okay." "It's more than okay. It's real." "I got a call today," Daniel continued, "from my former commanding officer. They want to bring me in as a consultant. Training programs for soldiers transitioning to civilian life, helping them process what they've experienced." "What did you tell him?" "I said I'd think about it. Wanted to talk to you first." Victoria smiled in the darkness. "I think it's perfect. You're uniquely qualified to help those people. And it's part-time, right? You'd still be here for Sophie?" "Absolutely. That's non-negotiable." "Then do it. Use everything you've learned, everything you've survived, to help others." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from weathering storms together. "Victoria?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you married me." She laughed softly. "Even with all the chaos?" "Especially with all the chaos, because it showed me who you really are. Not just the brilliant CEO, but the fighter, the strategist, the woman who refuses to back down when it matters. You brought all that out of me. No, it was always there. I just gave you a reason to use it. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling peaceful for the first time in what felt like forever. The reporters were gone. The threats were neutralized. The secrets were out in the open. They'd survived. More than that, they'd grown stronger. 3 weeks after Nazari's arrest, Victoria stood in a federal courtroom watching justice unfold with the cold efficiency of bureaucracy. Khalil Nazari sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his cultured demeanor stripped away by reality. The charges were extensive: conspiracy to commit espionage, attempted extortion, illegal surveillance, weapons trafficking. The evidence was overwhelming. Daniel sat beside Victoria, his presence steady and calm. He'd testified the day before, his account precise and unemotional, the soldier giving his report. The defense attorney had tried to paint him as a war criminal, to make Nazari's vendetta seem justified. But the prosecution had destroyed that narrative with cold facts and classified evidence that even the judge had trouble hearing without visible distress. Now, they waited for the verdict. Sophie was at school, safely ensconced in Westbrook Academy, where she'd made friends and joined the soccer team. Life was returning to something resembling normal, though Victoria suspected their definition of normal had permanently shifted. The jury filed back in after only 3 hours of deliberation. Not a good sign for the defense. The forewoman stood. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." Victoria felt Daniel's hand tighten around hers. Not celebration, just acknowledgement. This chapter was closing. Sentencing would come later, but the prosecutor had already indicated they'd be seeking life without parole. Nazari would spend the rest of his days in a maximum security federal prison, his reach finally contained. As they filed out of the courtroom, Victoria caught Nazari's eye one last time. He stared at her with pure hatred, but underneath it, she saw something else. Defeat. The acknowledgement that he'd underestimated them, that his carefully crafted revenge had unraveled because he'd failed to understand one fundamental truth. People who choose peace aren't weak. They're strong enough to walk away from violence, and when forced to fight, they fight smarter. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Daniel had gotten better at handling them, his initial discomfort replaced by a kind of resigned acceptance. He gave a brief statement thanking the federal prosecutors and expressing relief that justice had been served. "Do you have any message for other veterans struggling with similar situations?" a reporter called out. Daniel paused, considering. "Just that your past doesn't define you unless you let it. You get to choose who you become. And choosing peace, choosing family, choosing to rebuild instead of destroy, that's not running away. That's courage." The words resonated. Victoria saw it in the reporters' faces, in the small crowd of onlookers. This was the Daniel the world needed to see. Not the mysterious operator, not the action hero, just a man who'd made hard choices and was trying every day to be better. They drove home in comfortable silence, the afternoon sun warmed through the windows. The security detail that had been their constant shadow for weeks was finally gone. Rodriguez's team had been excellent, but it felt good to reclaim their privacy. At home, Victoria changed out of her courtroom attire into jeans and a sweater, the uniform of her new hybrid life. CEO and wife, executive and mother. She was learning to balance both identities, to let them complement each other rather than conflict. Her phone rang. Eleanor Vance. "The board just met," Eleanor said without preamble. "Cartwright submitted his resignation effective immediately." Victoria sat down slowly. "He resigned?" Apparently being proven spectacularly wrong multiple times was too much for his ego. He's taking a position at a smaller firm. Good riddance, honestly. Who's replacing him? We're voting on it next week. But Victoria, there's something else. The military contracts that were under review, they've been renewed. 5-year extensions on all of them. The Pentagon was apparently very impressed with how we handled the security breach attempt. Victoria felt a smile spreading across her face. "Eleanor, that's incredible." "It gets better. We're getting inquiries from 3 other government agencies about cybersecurity consulting. Your little counterintelligence operation caught some attention in the right circles." After hanging up, Victoria found Daniel in the kitchen starting dinner preparations. He'd taken over most of the cooking lately, finding peace in the routine of chopping vegetables and monitoring temperatures. Cartwright resigned, she told him, and our military contracts just got renewed for 5 years. Daniel looked up, a genuine smile breaking across his face. That's fantastic. You deserve it. We deserve it. This was a team effort. Speaking of team efforts, Daniel set down his knife. I had my first session with the transition program today. Met with 5 veterans who just retired, all struggling with civilian life. How did it go? Hard, rewarding. They're carrying a lot of the same weight I carried, the guilt, the uncertainty about who they are without the uniform. But I think I helped. At least, I hope I did. Victoria moved to stand beside him, hip to hip at the counter. You did, just by being there, by showing them it's possible to build something new. One of them asked if it gets easier, if the memories fade. What did you tell him? The truth, that the memories don't fade, but you learn to carry them differently. You find meaning in what comes next instead of drowning in what came before. They worked together preparing dinner, a choreographed dance they'd perfected over 3 years of marriage. Daniel handled the cooking while Victoria set the table and poured wine. Simple domestic rhythms that felt profound after everything they'd survived. Sophie arrived home via the school shuttle, bursting through the door with her usual energy. Mom, Dad, guess what happened today? What happened, Bug? Daniel asked, not looking up from the stove. Coach Martinez said I'm fast enough to try out for the advanced soccer team, the one that plays against other schools. Victoria caught Daniel's expression, pride mixed with the ever-present parental concern about kids growing up too fast. That's wonderful, sweetheart. When are tryouts? Next week. Will you come watch? Wouldn't miss it, Daniel and Victoria said in unison. Over dinner, Sophie chattered about soccer and school and her friend Emma's upcoming birthday party. Normal kid concerns, normal family conversation, the kind of ordinary that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. After Sophie went to bed, Victoria and Daniel retreated to their home office. They'd started a new routine, 30 minutes each evening, reviewing their respective days, coordinating schedules, making sure they stayed connected despite their busy lives. Marcus called earlier, Daniel mentioned. He's being promoted. Senior Vice President of Communications. It's well-deserved. He's been invaluable through all of this. He also asked if we'd join him for dinner next week. Him and his wife. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Marcus has a wife? I've worked with him for a decade and never knew he was married. Apparently they separated a few years ago, but recently reconciled. He credits the whole Nazari situation with putting things in perspective for him. Crisis has a way of doing that. Victoria pulled up her calendar. Friday works for us? I'll confirm with him. The following Friday, they met Marcus and his wife Jennifer at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Jennifer was warm and funny, a high school teacher who clearly adored her husband despite their rocky history. Marcus never stops talking about you two, Jennifer said over appetizers. The dynamic duo who took down a terrorist organization and a corrupt corporation. It wasn't quite that dramatic, Victoria protested. It absolutely was, Marcus countered. You orchestrated a counterintelligence operation that the FBI is still studying as a case example. Daniel shook his head. You're the one who cracked Martina's security code with 90 seconds to spare. That was all you. Team effort, Marcus insisted. Which is kind of my point. I spent years as a lone wolf journalist thinking I had to do everything myself. It nearly destroyed my marriage and almost got me killed in Yemen. Watching you two work together, trust each other completely. It reminded me what partnership actually looks like. Jennifer squeezed his hand. He came home after that whole ordeal and actually talked to me. Really talked. For the first time in years. About what happened in Yemen? Victoria asked gently. Marcus nodded. About the 3 days I spent thinking I was going to die. About the guilt I felt when I learned people died rescuing me. About the nightmares I'd been hiding behind work and emotional distance. He looked at Daniel. You said something during your testimony that stuck with me. About how carrying the weight alone doesn't make you strong, it just makes you isolated. I learned that the hard way, Daniel admitted. The evening flowed easily after that, the 4 of them trading stories and finding common ground. By dessert, Victoria felt like she'd known Jennifer for years. It was nice, she realized, to have friends who understood the complexity of their lives. who didn't flinch at difficult conversations. On the drive home, Daniel was quiet. Victoria waited, knowing he'd speak when he was ready. "I've been thinking about writing a book," he finally said. "About your service? About transition. About what happens when soldiers try to become civilians. The things nobody talks about." He glanced at her. "What do you think?" Victoria considered it. A few months ago, she would have been concerned about more exposure, more attention. But now, she understood the value of Daniel's story. "I think it could help a lot of people, but only if you're doing it for the right reasons." "What are the right reasons?" "To heal, to help others heal. Not to justify or defend or prove anything to anyone." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's what I want. A way to take all this chaos and make something useful from it." "Then you should do it." Work at Hailtech had settled into a new equilibrium. The board, minus Cartwright, was actually functional. The new government contracts brought stability and prestige, and Victoria found herself with time to focus on innovation instead of constantly fighting fires. She'd started mentoring young women in tech, sharing not just business strategies but life lessons. How to build a career without sacrificing family. How to lead with both strength and vulnerability. How to navigate spaces that weren't designed for you. One afternoon, a young engineer named Priya asked her, "How do you balance it all? The company, your marriage, your daughter. Everyone says you can't have everything, but you seem to manage." Victoria thought about the question carefully. "I don't balance it. Balance implies everything gets equal weight all the time. What I do is prioritize and adjust constantly. Some weeks work needs more of me. Some weeks family does. The key is having a partner who understands that and picks up the slack when you need them to. So it's about partnership. It's about choosing the right partner, someone who sees you as an equal, someone who isn't threatened by your success or diminished by your strength." Priya smiled. "You mean someone like your husband?" "Exactly like my husband." That evening, Victoria came home to find Daniel in the garage with Sophie, teaching her how to change a tire on her bicycle. The scene was so perfectly ordinary, so beautifully mundane, that Victoria stopped in the doorway just to watch. "You have to make sure the bolt is tight," Daniel was explaining, his hands guiding Sophie's smaller ones. "Otherwise, the wheel could come loose while you're riding." "Like this?" Sophie asked, concentrating hard. "Perfect. You're a natural." Sophie beamed with pride. "When I grow up, I want to fix things like you, Dad." "You can fix anything you set your mind to, Bug. And if you can't fix it, you can build something better." Victoria's throat tightened with emotion. This was what they'd fought for. Not just survival, but these moments. The teaching and learning and growing together. Later, after Sophie was asleep, Victoria and Daniel sat on their bedroom balcony watching the city lights. They'd started doing this most nights, a quiet ritual of connection. "I got an interesting call today," Daniel said. "From the Pentagon. They want me to consult on a new training program for special operations personnel, specifically focused on ethical decision-making in combat situations." Victoria turned to look at him. "How do you feel about that?" "Conflicted. Part of me wants to help, to maybe prevent other soldiers from having to make the choices I made, but part of me worries about getting pulled back into that world." "What does your gut say?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "That I can do this without losing myself. That I've changed enough to engage with my past without being consumed by it. Then trust that. You're not the same man who left the military. You've grown, evolved. You can bring that wisdom back without sacrificing who you've become." "You really believe that?" "I've watched you navigate impossible situations with grace and integrity. I've seen you choose peace when violence would have been easier. You're exactly the person they need for this." Daniel pulled her close. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You chose me. Every single day you keep choosing me. That's all anyone can ask for." The weeks turned into months, and life continued its forward momentum. Daniel's book proposal was accepted by a major publisher. Victoria's company launched a groundbreaking cybersecurity initiative that made national news. Sophie made the advanced soccer team and scored her first goal. But it was the small moments that mattered most. Family dinners where everyone talked about their day, weekend hikes in the mountains, movie nights with popcorn and blankets. The ordinary beauty of a life well lived. 6 months after Nazari's trial, Victoria received an invitation to speak at a women's leadership conference. The topic was navigating crisis as a CEO. She almost declined. Public speaking about personal matters wasn't her preference. But something made her accept. The conference was held in a massive hotel ballroom, hundreds of women from various industries filling the seats. Victoria stood backstage, notes in hand, more nervous than she'd been in any boardroom. Daniel had come with her, sitting in the front row with Sophie, both wearing encouraging smiles. When her name was called, Victoria walked onto the stage with her head high and her heart steady. 3 years ago, she began, I thought I understood leadership. I'd built a successful company. I made tough decisions. I commanded respect in boardrooms. But I didn't truly understand leadership until my entire world fell apart, and I had to figure out how to put it back together. She told them about the Plaza incident, though not the classified details, about the media storm and the board challenges, about corporate espionage and terrorist threats. But mostly, she told them about partnership. I learned that strength isn't about controlling everything. It's about knowing when to trust others, when to ask for help, when to admit you don't have all the answers. She looked directly at Daniel. My husband taught me that. He'd spent 12 years as a soldier, trained to be self-sufficient and mission-focused, but he chose to be vulnerable with me, to share the weight instead of carrying it alone. And that vulnerability made us both stronger. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. So when people ask me how I balance career and family, I tell them I don't. What I do is integrate. My family makes me a better CEO because they remind me what I'm working for. My career makes me a better mother because I'm showing my daughter that women can be powerful and successful without sacrificing love. And my marriage works because we see each other as equals, partners, people who make each other better simply by being together. She paused, letting the words settle. You don't have to choose between success and happiness, between power and partnership, between being strong and being vulnerable. You can be all of those things. You just need to find people who see your complexity as an asset, not a problem, who celebrate your victories and support you through your defeats, who choose you every single day the same way you choose them. The applause when she finished was thunderous. Women stood, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Victoria saw herself reflected in their faces. The struggle to be everything, the fear that they weren't enough, the hope that maybe, just maybe, they could have it all. Afterward, dozens of women approached her with questions and stories, young executives dealing with discrimination, mothers struggling with guilt, women who'd sacrificed relationships for careers or vice versa. Victoria listened to each one, offering what wisdom she could. One woman, older than the rest, waited until everyone else had left. I just wanted to thank you, she said quietly. My daughter died in Yemen. She was a journalist covering the Civil War. I've spent 7 years angry at the world, at the military, at everyone involved. But listening to you talk about your husband, about the impossible choices soldiers make, I think I finally understand. They were just trying to do their best in an impossible situation. Victoria's heart clenched. I'm so sorry for your loss. So am I. But I'm choosing to let go of the anger, to focus on the good she did instead of how she died. Your story helped me see that. After the woman left, Victoria found Daniel and Sophie waiting in the lobby. You were amazing, Mom, Sophie said, hugging her tight. The best speech I've ever heard, Daniel added, and I've sat through a lot of military briefings, so that's saying something. They went to dinner at Sophie's favorite restaurant, celebrating not the speech but the life they'd built together, the life they'd almost lost but fought to keep. On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the day's excitement. Daniel carried her inside and tucked her into bed while Victoria stood in the doorway watching. She's getting so big, Victoria whispered. Too big. She'll be a teenager before we know it. Don't even joke about that. I'm not ready. They retreated to their bedroom, the house quiet around them. Daniel pulled Victoria close and they swayed together in the darkness, dancing to music only they could hear. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Victoria asked. If that truck hadn't crashed, if you'd never had to use your training, if your past had stayed buried. All the time. But I don't think we'd be here if all that hadn't happened. The crisis forced us to really see each other, to trust each other completely. We might have coasted for years otherwise, never going deeper than surface level. So you're saying almost losing everything was good for us? I'm saying we proved we can survive anything together, and that's worth more than all the peace in the world. Victoria pulled back to look at him. I love you, Daniel Hayes, the soldier, the father, the man who chose peace but kept his strength. All of you. I love you too, Victoria Hayes, the CEO, the mother, the woman who fights for what's hers and never backs down. All of you. They stood together in the quiet of their home, two people who'd been tested by fire and emerged stronger. Two people who'd learned that love wasn't about finding someone perfect, but finding someone perfectly willing to grow alongside you. The next morning, Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Daniel's arm around her waist. She could hear Sophie singing in her room, getting ready for school. Normal sounds. Beautiful sounds. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. The defense contracts had been finalized. Hailtech stock had hit an all-time high. The board wanted to discuss expansion into international markets. Work was good. Family was good. Life was good. But more than that, Victoria realized she'd finally figured out the secret. It wasn't about having everything perfectly balanced. It was about being present for what mattered, letting go of what didn't, and trusting the people you loved to catch you when you stumbled. She thought about the woman at the conference, the mother who'd lost her daughter in Yemen, about Nazari, rotting in a federal prison because he'd let revenge consume him, about Colonel Martinez, who'd betrayed everything for money, about all the ways people could lose themselves when they forgot what actually mattered. And she was grateful. Grateful that Daniel had chosen differently. Grateful that she'd fought for their life together instead of running from the complications. Grateful for every messy, chaotic, beautiful moment that had brought them here. Daniel stirred beside her. What are you thinking about? How lucky we are. Even after everything? Especially after everything. He kissed her forehead. Want to get pancakes before I drop Sophie at school? Always. They got up together, joined Sophie in the kitchen, and made breakfast as a family. Daniel flipped pancakes while Sophie set the table and Victoria made coffee. They talked about the day ahead. Sophie's soccer practice, Daniel's session with the Veterans Program, Victoria's meeting with the board. Ordinary plans for an ordinary day. But there was nothing ordinary about the love in that kitchen. The way Daniel's hand found Victoria's as they moved around each other. The way Sophie looked at her parents with complete trust and security. The way three people who'd survived so much could still find joy in pancakes and morning light. After breakfast, after Sophie was dropped at school, and Daniel headed to the VA center, and Victoria arrived at her office, life continued its beautiful, complicated dance. But now they knew the steps. Now they understood the rhythm. Now they trusted each other enough to improvise when the music changed. Victoria sat at her desk, looking at the photos she kept there. The three of them at the beach last summer, sun-kissed and laughing. Daniel had his arms around both his girls, his smile genuine and unguarded. Sophie was mid-laugh, caught in a moment of pure joy. And Victoria herself looked happy in a way she'd never been before Daniel. Not because he completed her, she'd been complete on her own, but because he'd chosen to walk beside her instead of behind or ahead, because he saw her strength and matched it with his own, because they'd built something together that was greater than either of them alone. Her phone rang. Daniel. Hey, just wanted to hear your voice, Victoria smiled. You saw me an hour ago. I know, but I was sitting here with these veterans talking about finding purpose after service, and I realized my purpose is you and Sophie. Everything else is just details. You're getting sentimental in your old age. I'm 37. That's not old, says the man who grunted getting out of bed this morning. Daniel laughed. Fair point. Okay, I'll let you get back to running your empire. Love you. Love you too. Victoria set down her phone and turned to her computer, ready to tackle the day's challenges. But she did so with the knowledge that whatever came next, whatever obstacles or opportunities or unexpected chaos, she wouldn't face it alone. She had Daniel, she had Sophie. She had a family that had been tested and proven unbreakable, and that was more than enough. That evening, as the sun set over the city and Victoria drove home, she thought about the journey that had brought them here, the secrets revealed, the battles fought, the choices made. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, so certain she had everything figured out, so convinced that control and planning could protect her from surprise. And she thought about the woman she'd become, Someone who understood that strength came in many forms, that vulnerability could be powerful, that the best things in life were often the ones you couldn't plan for. At home, Daniel was cooking dinner while helping Sophie with her homework. The scene was so perfectly them that Victoria stood in the doorway for a moment, committing it to memory. "Mom," Sophie called out, "tell Dad that 7 times 8 is 56, not 54. "Your daughter's right," Victoria said, hanging up her coat. "You're thinking of 6 times 9. Daniel groaned. "I used to calculate artillery trajectories. How am I getting basic multiplication wrong?" "Because you're distracted by your beautiful daughter's homework questions," Victoria teased, kissing his cheek. They ate dinner together, the 3 of them around the table that had witnessed so many meals. They talked and laughed and argued playfully about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. They were a family, imperfect and real and completely whole. After Sophie went to bed, Victoria and Daniel took their usual walk around the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, the air cool with approaching autumn. They held hands, walking in comfortable silence. "Do you think we'll ever have a boring life?" Victoria asked. "Define boring." "I don't know. No terrorists, no corporate espionage. Just regular problems like fixing the dishwasher and arguing about whose turn it is to take out the trash." Daniel laughed. "That sounds amazing, actually. Let's aim for that." "Deal." But even as they said it, they both knew the truth. Their life would never be simple because they weren't simple people. They were complex and layered and still figuring things out. But they were doing it together, and that made all the difference. Back at home, they stood in their bedroom preparing for sleep. Daniel pulled Victoria close one more time. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me. All of me. The parts I was proud of and the parts I wanted to hide. For loving me anyway." Victoria touched his face gently. "You made it easy. You chose to be seen. That's the brave part." "We're both pretty brave, I think." "Yeah, we are." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, 2 people who'd found their way through darkness and chosen light. 2 people who'd learned that the strongest foundations were built not on perfection, but on honesty, trust, and the daily choice to show up for each other. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Inside, a family slept peacefully, safe in the life they'd fought to protect. And in the quiet of that night, in the stillness of that home, there was a profound truth. Love wasn't about finding someone without shadows. It was about finding someone brave enough to step into the light with you. Daniel Hayes had been a soldier, an operator, a man trained for violence and chaos. But his greatest act of courage wasn't anything he'd done in combat. It was choosing, every single day, to be present, to be vulnerable, to be the father and husband his family needed instead of the warrior the world expected. Victoria Hayes had been a CEO, a leader, a woman who commanded respect and built empires. But her greatest achievement wasn't Hailtech or her wealth or her influence. It was choosing, every single day, to fight for her family with the same intensity she brought to her boardroom, to see strength in partnership rather than control, to build a life instead of just a career. And Sophie Hayes, young and still learning, was growing up watching 2 people who loved each other enough to show up imperfectly, who argued and made up, who failed and tried again, who proved that strength came in many forms, and the strongest people were the ones who knew when to be gentle. Their story didn't end with dramatic flourishes or grand declarations. It continued in the small moments, the breakfast conversations and bedtime stories, the shared glances across crowded rooms, the hands finding each other in the dark. It continued in the choice they made every morning to wake up and choose each other again. Because that's what real love looked like. Not the explosion of passion or the drama of crisis, but the steady daily commitment to show up, to see and be seen, to grow together instead of apart. Daniel had been right all those months ago when he'd told Victoria that his gentleness wasn't who he used to be, but who he'd chosen to become. Because choice was everything. He'd chosen peace over violence, family over duty, love over fear, and Victoria had chosen to fight for that choice, to protect it, to nurture it, to build a life around it that could withstand any storm. They were proof that people could change, that soldiers could become fathers, that CEOs could be vulnerable, that strength didn't require hardness, and gentleness didn't mean weakness. They were proof that the most extraordinary thing a person could do wasn't survive impossible odds or defeat dangerous enemies. It was to choose, every single day, to be present for the people they loved, to show up, to stay, to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. And in doing so, they'd given Sophie the greatest gift any parent could give. They'd shown her what real strength looked like, not in the ability to fight, but in the courage to love.